Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Night Shift's second episode. I'm joined tonight by the lovely Bonnie Burton, author, showrunner. What haven't you done, really? Podcasting, crafter.
If you're around long enough, you do everything.
Yeah, everything. And, of course, the amazing Jenna Hayes is joining us again today. So good to have you back again. I was so impressed by Jenna's meticulous note-taking. So are you ready? Yep. This is brilliant. That's what
I even typed it up this time.
What? Oh, amazing. Because I thought I will give you the first cab off the rank because I know how much work you put into your notes. But first, I'd just like to let everyone know, obviously, if you didn't know, we are talking about Men, Alex Garland's film. Some of his previous films you might know as Annihilation, also Ex Machina, which was one that I really loved. And, of course, he also, what was the other one we were talking about recently?
We did Dread.
Yeah, Dread, yeah.
The good one.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that. I've seen the other two, and I love the other two. So
yeah. Yeah, and this was
I haven't seen that. I've seen the other two, and I love the other two. So
yeah. I just accidentally clicked on ourselves, guys. Sorry about that.
We're multiplying already.
Yeah, I'm like, whoa, lemmings.
Don't clone me, please.
Yeah. No. If we do, we'll just save you and send the other one out into the world so we don't lose you. Yeah. So, this is a film that I really, really enjoyed. And I know I first heard Jenna speak about it, and then she was really, really passionate about it. So I was like, that pushed me to hurry and go and see it sooner because I was already planning to. But after hearing Jenna talk about it, I was like, I've really got to see this. And I mentioned it, of course, to Bonnie, and all of us seemed to be pretty much in agreement that we all like this film and different things about it, which is why we picked it for today. So I'm just going to play the trailer for those of you who aren't aware, or if you just need a little what do you call it? A
review?
Review, kind of.
Hello.
Hi.
Mrs. Marlowe, yes?
Harper, yes.
Do, come in.
The words I have to say.
It's a beautiful house.
But they're true.
Would it just be you staying, or
Excuse me?
Mrs. Marlowe?
No.
Until you give your love, there's nothing more that we can do.
Apple from the garden?
Yeah, it was delicious.
No. Mustn't do that. Forbidden fruit.
Oh, God, sorry,
I'm joking.
Oh.
You're tormented.
Feels more like...
Haunted.
Yeah. Something happened. My husband went upstairs to our balcony and let himself go.
You must wonder why you drove him to it.
Why, I didn't drive him to it.
I think it'd be true that if you had given him the chance to apologize, he'd still be alive.
What? A man followed me out of the woods. He was stalking me.
What makes you say that?
I saw him twice.
Twice. I don't know if he saw you once.
Want to play a game? You hide, I'll seek.
You must feel an awful sense of guilt.
Stay away from me.
Why are you doing that?
What are you?
There it is. Okay.
That was really interesting because I actually
It gives me little like shivery bits.
I haven't seen the trailer, so I went into the movie watching it. Like I don't like to watch trailers really. I like to just see a movie that's coming out, see the poster, and be like, I'm gonna go see that.
Yeah.
I
watched the trailer after we were talking about it, and I was like, ooh, now I'm really pumped to see it.
I feel like they give away so much in trailers, which is why I don't usually watch them.
Yeah.
I like to go and be surprised.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think even if you had seen one thing about this film is even if you had seen it, the trailer, I think there's still so many things that happen in this film that you would have absolutely no clue that were coming. So unlike
in fact, when I saw the trailer, I expected a totally different movie than I got. So nothing was spoiled for me. Other than obviously all the men are played by, except for her husband, are played by Rory Kinnear, who's a great actor. I loved him in Penny Dreadful when he played Frankenstein's monster. I mean, he's such a well-known British actor. He's in everything, but
but you don't. I feel like he's one of those actors that's in everything, and he's obviously a great theater actor.
Yeah, and also it's just interesting that he plays every. I mean, you find out later why, but the fact that in the trailer at first I didn't realize it, and then I was like,
no, neither did I. It went straight over.
Yeah, and even when he's a child, it's him. That's just
his head. I'm like, how did I? Yeah, you kind of stare for a minute. When I rewatched it last night.
But this movie's not anything when I expected. I will say, the director and writer, Alex Garland, right? His movie Annihilation, which is based on a book, was one of my favorite movies of. I think it's pre-pandemic. I remember that's one of. Yes. I did see it in the theater, so I know it was like 2018 or 2019. That was also a heavy movie to watch. I had to watch it multiple times. So for this movie, I had to watch it multiple times because I was like, did I miss something? Because if it's a movie that's got a lot of weird subtext and a lot of interesting ideas, I don't want to be like, I like to watch a movie for fun the first time around and then watch it more like a critic because I do review movies for a living too. I like to look at it with a critic's eye, but I want to look at it first with a horror
kind of entertainment.
Yeah, like a horror fan eye, so I don't get too critical, too bogged down. And what does this mean? What's the metaphor for this? And then I'll watch it again and go, okay, I get it now. But I do remember I didn't watch it with an audience. I just got it online, paid for it online to stream. I would be curious to know what it was like to watch this with an audience.
I saw it in the theater.
Yeah. What was the reaction like in the theaters?
Well, there weren't a lot of people in the theater when I saw it. But it was pretty quiet. And there were a lot of men in the audience.
Oh yeah.
And I actually saw it. I went on a date and I was with a guy and he had actually seen it already a couple days before that. And I was so much more thrilled with it than he was.
He was, yeah.
I don't think he got it. I don't think he understood it. And he just, not to insult him or anything,
Yeah.
But it just wasn't as I loved it. I loved this movie as much as I loved Midsommar.
Wow.
Yeah. That's one of my favorite movies of all time now. So I came out of it. It ended it was just quiet through the whole thing pretty much. There were everyone was just like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Especially the end, and then we walked out and I was just like, oh my God, that was so amazing. Oh my God, did you get this? Oh my God, did you get? And he was just kind of like, what?
No. Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that because I had put this film to my housemate and said, you really got to watch this film. and she watched it and absolutely loved it. But similarly, she, suggested it to male friends and whatnot. And so had I. And I had yet to find a male that got it or that really enjoyed it as much as all of the females I know did. And I thought that was almost
kind of telling.
Yeah, this film and everything it entails, and then the fact that so many men actually don't get it was it was almost fitting for the film.
Yes, and it's very similar to Midsummer, because like I loved Midsummer, and all of not all of my guy friends, because some of them did like it, but most of them just didn't love it the way that I loved it, and they didn't really I had like a very emotional response to that movie, and it was just such a different horror movie because it was so bright, and it was just so like the opposite of what a scary movie usually is. There was some blood and gore, but it wasn't like, it was just so different. And I just loved it because also, the same as this movie, it had a very feminist perspective, and I loved it. But all the guys I talked to were like, it was okay. And that's exactly what this one too. Like, I do have one guy friend who loved it, and I asked him, I was like, well, what did you get from it? And like, he just started talking about it, and I was like, yes, you got it.
Wow. I was thinking while I was watching it, there was like so many moments. I don't know if both of you felt the same, but there was a lot of moments during the film that I felt incredibly like kind of cringy, because I had felt like, oh my God, I've been in this situation. Oh my God, I've seen that situation. Or, so many different like very small moments, but are very they're like, everyday horror that's kind of sitting below the surface for women. And just so many little moments. And there's like even one of them that really like, obviously there's so many, but one that I stuck with me after I finished watching it was, obviously the boy who's played by Rory Kinnear. So he's got a kind of big head, but like when he asks if he can play with her, and she says no, and then he goes, stupid bitch, as he walks away. And I just had every moment. I had every moment in my entire life that I've ever turned a guy down or said I didn't like something or whatever it might be, and someone said, oh, you stupid bitch, dumb whore, whatever, cow, like, you're ugly anyway. All those kind of remarks that come at you when you don't do something on men's terms that is actually quite uncomfortable when it's a complete stranger. And often, for women in everyday life, we come across situations that are with complete strangers that are men, and they do say things that are very uncomfortable, or like, expect certain things from you.
Oh, you froze. Renee, you froze.
The host is frozen.
A bit of a stream. There is that kind of weird, like angle to it where, I think, there's that uncomfortableness of when, women are put in that, situation.
Also, I mean, I think too, women are taught at a very young age to be agreeable, to be nice, to be polite, to not succumb, but just, put up with a lot of bullshit, and guys don't. So if I was thinking about this, what if this movie had been gender flipped and it was a widower and the whole town were women and they were the same actress? It would not be the same, you know what I mean? It would not send a message. Because men don't have this problem. Men are not bombarded by men who are strangers who expect you to be accommodating to their needs when you don't even know them. And this is something that I'm finding more and more of the next generation of Gen Zers not putting up with it. Millennial women I'm seeing not put up with it, which is great. But I'm a Gen Xer. And when we were raised in the 70s and 80s, it was still very much, be polite, respond when someone says something, smile when someone says smile, like, that kind of thing. And watching this movie for women, I think also of a certain age, is going to be very different than for men watching, because we have a bullseye on our back from birth and men don't. And so we have to constantly be aware of our surroundings, whether it's daytime or nighttime. We have to know where exits are. We have to be aware of micro expressions of strangers we're on dates with, because we don't know if they're going to hurt us sometime during the date. I mean, I'm not saying we're always like super, and I'm not speaking for all women. I'm just saying, it's not like we're all paranoid and we think all men are the enemy. It's not that at all. No. There are very many nice, awesome dudes out there, but the default for women to survive in this world is we have to be constantly on the alert, not on the defensive, just on the alert. And when you are constantly on the alert, you never get a chance to like relax. You never get a chance to like just, you know what I mean? Just take a breath. Whereas guys, dude, there's this great, I hate to bring him up because he's a comedian that's got kind of controversial, Aziz. He did Master of One, Master of None, whatever. There's this great scene he did in a series of showing what it's like for a woman to walk alone home from a bar and a guy to walk home alone from a bar. And a woman, it's like a horror film. You hear this like horror film music. She's constantly looking around. Some guy like stumbles in front of her and she gets, and she runs off. And she finally gets to her front door. And the guy who like offered a drink at the bar and she said no, has followed her home. And he's like, hey, I just wanted to say, if you want to go on a date, and she like goes into her apartment and closes the door real quick. Whereas for a guy, they play like Three Stooges music and he's just drunk and stumbling and having a great old time walking home, and there's no threat and there's nothing. It's like that. It's like, when guys go jogging at night, it's not the same when you're a female going jogging at night. It's like you always have to be on the alert. And this movie really hit hard for me on that, where I'm like, she's in a village full of strange men who are being very familiar and insulting to her on a regular basis. And yes, it's all played by the same actor. That's creepy in itself. But she is like bombarded with these like really inappropriate moments constantly.
Yeah, over and over.
Over and over.
And speaking of how she went to the bar, like she went to the bar to have a drink and relax. And she got there and the caretaker guy was like, she was like trying to pay for her own drink. And he was like, no, like, let me pay for it. And like overrode her wishes, that domineering kind of attitude. Yeah. And it's like when guys do that, it's like like you're indebted to them. Like they make you feel like you're indebted to them and like you owe them something. And like, it was just such a creepy part for me where it was like, no, like let her buy her own damn drink, Yeah. And then the police officer was like so dismissive about, oh, well, we let the guy go. And it's like, you don't have anything to worry about, just so dismissive of her experience and of her fear. And then she had to walk home alone from the bar. And I was just like, oh man, like we've all been there. And it sucks.
I mean, I've weapons in my purse before that I've actually pepper sprayed myself more than I have ever pepper sprayed in a church because I just forget it's in there and I think it's like, like breath spray or like perfume.
Oh God.
But I used to have like a bag full of weapons. Like I had a taser, I had a knife. I was like ready for battle.
That's amazing.
But this movie is interesting because the way it starts out is that you see basically a death of her husband, and you don't know if he jumped from the roof, he was pushed from the roof. You don't know if it was suicide, accident, murder, whatever. And she goes, and I love this premise so much because as we know, as horror film fans, why do people think they could go to the English countryside to relax?
I know. Seriously.
It's so crazy. It's like you would be better if you just went to Brighton and like hung out with the gays in the bars. You would be so much better than going to the countryside thinking you're going to have some relaxation. No, it's like any folk.
Yeah. When I watched this, I was having all these flashbacks to when I lived in England, and I was like, yes, your phone never works. The internet does never work. And like you're in the middle of nowhere. No one can hear you. There's all these huge grounds. There's no lights anywhere. So when you are walking home from the pub, there is nothing. It's just desolate and pitch black. Yeah. It is frightening. Like, so it's like they took something that was already going to be frightening and put it in the isolated like countryside where it's even more frightening because you don't have easy access to anything. And like when she's talking to her friend and her friend's like, it was a 4-hour drive away, like to visit her, you just sort of get that idea of she's just stuck there in this little village with, all these men.
I mean, it is disconcerting in the beginning of the movie because the first half of the movie, you're like, I love the soundtrack, the cinematography is beautiful. You know, you're getting to know Harper, you're getting to know her story a bit. And it's you don't know what to expect. And then the last half of the movie, you're like hit with like a fuckload of weird shit. And it's just it's not anything I imagined at all. Like it was just, I thought it was just gonna be a commentary on men just being assholes and weird. And it was gonna be something like that. And maybe like a slightly Midsummer-esque or slightly, you know, something like that, like slightly feminist. Yeah. Instead, it turned into like a crazy, like body horror / Green Man / folk horror.
Yeah, as well.
And it's just like, I think that's where it lost a lot of people, because I watched a lot of reviews because I love this movie. I thought it was crazy, and the crazier the movie, the better for me. But especially with a female lead who's not perfect. You know, she's not Buffy the Vampire Slayer. She's not a fighter. She I think she represents the freeze response when you're a woman. Sometimes when you're in a trauma situation, you either fight or flight, or sometimes you just freeze. And that's okay too. You know what I mean? You don't have to be Xena warrior princess to have to deal with all this stuff. Like sometimes it is so frightening, you don't know what to do. And that was the problem I had with the movie in the beginning. I'm like, why doesn't she fight back? Why doesn't she? And I mean, she only stabs him once, and it's when it's like he's a kid. And yeah, they get to it later of what that means by her wounding him once. But there's so many moments in the movie where I like, just kick him in the balls. But I know not all women are like that. And also, you don't know how you're going to react when you're in that situation either. So I try not to be too judgy with fictional characters, because I don't know what I would do. Like, would I accidentally bear spray myself instead of the person that I meant to bear spray? You know what I mean? So, but this movie was so interesting because the last half of it, I'm just like, I did not expect any of it. I mean, I'm curious what you guys thought about it when it's like the first half seems like one movie, and then the second half seems like a totally different spin.
Just to say, she actually did. She stabs him in the hand, and she stabs him in the hand. But then when he's in the bathroom with her, she stabs him again.
Oh, that's right. That's
but
right.
She does let him get like pretty dang, intimate.
Yeah, very close. Yeah.
Before she like really goes for it. But yes, I also felt like the first half was kind of one thing, and the next half was another. Very kind of like Mandy reminiscent for me, where like the first half was like one thing, and
I felt like that was that like the layer, do you think? Because I kind of felt like that was deliberate, that we had the first part and the second, like it was kind of like we're starting at the top layer, and this is what happens as you peel it back.
Well, yeah, and it's also kind of reflective of the way that men disarm us and get us to trust them, and then they oftentimes turn into, not always, of course, because I'm not going to sound like a man hater here, but
no. And that is also a funny thing with this film, is that people, some of the people that I have heard, men and
oh no,
she feels good. Oh no, we should blame Australia for Renee.
For some reason the internet's being weird.
It's okay,
Sorry,
Renee.
The internet's being strange. Sorry, guys. Like the way that it kind of is this like Jenna said, like disarming you, and you think everyone's really pleasant, and like when she first meets the house guy, she thinks he's a little weird.
Yeah, I mean,
but she doesn't like whereas I would have been like, weirdo. From like,
I think that's very common. That's very common. I don't know how often you guys rent Airbnbs, but let me tell you, it's pretty common when you meet the person who's renting it to you or handing you the keys or whatever. It's always awkward town. It is always awkward and weird. And sometimes it's come off as like, well, sometimes I'm like, are there secret cameras everywhere? Is this going to be one of those situations? Or is this guy okay? Is he like Norman Bates? Like, should I make sure I don't take showers while I'm at this Airbnb? Wow. But I mean, there's,
he's so British and so like, I'm just like, this is giving me the creeps.
Yeah, but
they still exist, obviously.
Even though it's kind of like idyllic and it's like, this beautiful countryside, and she goes on this walk and it's just gorgeous, and she like kind of embraces her independence in the walk with the thunderstorm, and she's by herself, and she's dressed very androgynous at that point too. She's dressed very masculine at that point, where later on she switches to a much more like almost like a religious sect kind of dress, like
the dress, But I'd love to know what his thoughts were on why he picked that, because I did think it was like that was she went from this to then very feminine, and it was like giving her this particular look.
Well, because I felt like it was kind of a reflection of like, well, now she's kind of in their trap. You know what I mean? She's kind of been placed in the role of a woman, because when he's showing her around the house and stuff, he makes a lot of kind of, misogynistic comments or, sexist comments where he's like, oh, well, you ate the apple. Well, that's the forbidden fruit type thing. And he's like, oh, I'm just kidding. And then he makes the comment about, flushing the tampons or whatever.
Yeah.
And then the other one was, he was like, oh, well, in the kitchen, there's the tea, where it should be, like, because women, that's their place in the kitchen with the tea.
Well, and he makes a comment about him being married. Yeah.
And it was just, it was just very uncomfortable for me. And like, I was just kind of like, okay, this guy's being very sexist. Like,
it was very old timey. And then he makes that comment about the missus.
Yeah.
Oh yes. Well. Which is like, awesome. Oh my God, that part. I'm glad you brought that up, because he says because he's like, he kept calling her Mrs. throughout the film. He kept calling her Mrs. And it was very clear. Like at one point he kind of shouts it at her too. And after the movie really going. And then when she like corrects him or whatever, and he says Ms., he says it very condescendingly. And he asks where her hubby is, like, where's the hubby? As if like every woman must be owned by a man. Every woman is property of a man. So you are a Mrs. That is your place to be, owned and property of a man. And it's such objectification, like,
it was really like uncomfortable. And I mean, from what I did like quite a bit of reading after I first watched it the first time on what Alex Garland have kind of said in the media and what he'd said on panels and things about the film. And it was interesting just on like sort of where he got his inspiration and like what he was drawing from. And he'd been working on this film for like 10 years and had just kept dropping it because he still wasn't sure where he was going with it. So, and that actually is even more interesting to me, the fact that it's been there for so long, that those issues that we feel like are only rising to the surface, this was already mostly written. So he was just sort of coming in and out and changing and adding things as it got closer to it. And he was like, yep, now I'm comfortable with this film. Now we're going to go ahead. And then he also had quite a big folklore focus. So, it was The Green Man and Sheila Nig, which, is Sheila Nig is like a, the object kind of, it's like a carving, and it's like depicting a woman who's showing her vagina basically, and then you have Green Man as well, and
I mean, and that makes sense, because how many rebirths do we have in this movie? And it's coming from the male.
So it's interesting reading. And he sort of said that he was aware that it was about these gender things, but that it wasn't totally forming the movie. But then as they were creating it, obviously the actors and himself became more and more aware of how integral it was. And the fact that it is written, by a man as well, and that is like amazing. So many, like, this guy's got it, and he executed it so well. There was, like I said, moments where it was so cringy, like, and you just felt, ugh. And then you could feel that kind of, it's more about like the sense of horror, and it's kind of bubbling rather than, obviously that straightaway horror of like someone being chased or attacked, or you had this kind of sinister feeling all throughout the film that something was not quite right.
A bit like a thriller more than a horror film at the beginning. I mean, it didn't hit horror to me until body horror started happening, right? When it's like the rebirth thing, like that. But
which I found hard to watch the second time, I've got to say.
It's hard to watch.
I loved it.
I looked away for a minute, and then I went, no, let's watch this.
I did the same thing. That's why I watched it a second time, because I knew it was coming. So I was like, okay, I have to watch this. I have to figure this out.
Yeah,
But I
was like, I need to watch. I need to see what's going on here now.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
the first time it was all so like, whoa.
Can I tell you though, like, the
what's
thing
going
that freaked
on?
me
You know?
out, the thing that freaked me out the
Mhm.
most about this movie is the moment when the naked guy is stalking her from the forest and
Yeah.
following her. That freaked me out because I've had people follow me, like
Oh.
guys follow me from parks and things, like when I'm walking my dog through Golden Gate Park, which I did every day. I could tell when I was being followed, or if I was, you
There's
know,
moments,
somewhere
in
isolated.
this film where she has that feeling where, you know, where she's like, and there's that.
It's an isolation fear. It's isolation fear when you are by yourself, but you know there's danger. When you feel danger, you can feel it on the back of your neck. It's a survival, you know, it's deep down in us. It's survival. Go with your gut. You know, most women say, you know, they go with their gut if they see some guy across the street and it looks like, you know, they're kind of honing in on them, they will go into the first public building and just stay there and just until they can get a friend to hang out with them and walk them home, or get an Uber or something, or even in an Uber when you're not feeling so safe. So it's like, you know, it's one of those things. Like, this movie was hard to watch because I know it's fiction. I know not everyone looks like Rory Kinnear, which isn't a bad thing. Rory's very attractive, but you know, it's like it starts to like, for me, the movie was a bit like all guys were starting to seem the same, and that's why they all were looking the same, because it was after a while, it just becomes, this is what they do and this is what we have to do to survive. And it's not an I hate men movie. I don't think, in fact, I almost think it does a disservice by calling itself Men. I wish it was almost called something else, because I think people going to this movie are expecting something else. And I don't know, did the writer director ever say why he called it Men, or was it just
No, I don't think I saw anything about why he called it Men specifically, but I would love to hear also Rory Kinnear talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing too. It's like, I want to hear Harper. I want to hear Harper talk about, like, the actress that played Harper.
Yeah.
I mean, Jessie Buckley. She was amazing in this role. I don't know how. Really good. I don't know how you can play this role and not have a nervous breakdown afterwards.
Yeah. I know. Just the stress of it, like.
I know. I was just like, ugh. There were so many moments where I was so tense watching this movie that I was like, I'm going to need to like take a hot bath after I watch this, because I am just like every muscle. And it's not because I'm afraid of jump scares or anything like that. It's just that it's real life tension. And it's like, I didn't know if this is too real.
Well, yeah. And there's moments like, that are like the priest.
Oh,
when he says to her, you know, men hit, like men hit, and that's just, it's not pretty, but that's how, would you prefer things not be real? And I was thinking, she sat there like a couple of minutes longer than I would have.
I know. I mean, I wanted the priest to be like a priest that we normally see priests be around women who are grieving, which is like, they offer them comfort, they talk about forgiveness, they talk about patience. You know, they give you the grief talk, and instead it's like, hey, did you think maybe it was your fault?
Yeah, it was absolutely victim blaming of like, well, this is your fault, and placing that misplaced guilt upon her and being like, this is your fault. And he also normalizes domestic violence while doing it. Well, you know, did you just give him a chance to apologize or talk about it? Like, no, the guy punched her in the face like a dude. Like, he just like, and knocked her across the room. Like, no, like, that's not okay. And the way that he was just like, well, you know, it was pretty much your fault for him committing suicide. And, you know, you didn't give him a chance. And he put his hand on her leg. He like put his hand on her leg, and like after she got up and walked away, he was like caressing her,
patronizing.
Yes, and he was caressing her seat, and then he did that like creepy thing with the lip gloss. Like,
no,
it was.
How many priests do you know have lip gloss, by the way?
Well, chapstick, yeah.
You know what I mean.
I don't stay long enough to see what their facial routines are, so I'm not really. But I mean.
I was like, I guess it's an everyday priest.
Oh,
it was just so creepy. I mean, the fact that I knew something was wrong with him when he walked in and she was screaming, and he didn't like come up to her and console her or anything. He didn't say, hey, are you okay? Like, what's going on? Like, he just scream, and then he just let her scream, and then after she was outside, he like walked up to her, and at first it seems like he might be like kind of like nice, because he's like, oh, I should have come up to you, and then I'm sorry, he was just so creepy. It was just so, and it was like he was preying on her too, like it was like.
Yeah.
Like they were
I know. I was like, there's also
they're like all the male characters that were one man, are one creature, I guess you should call it. We're almost feeding off of her grief, feeding off of her anxiety. I mean, that is something that's pretty tropey with horror films. There's always, if it's a supernatural creature that is evil, it feeds off of grief, feeds off of tension, feeds off of fear. But this one was weirdly explained, so I'm not going to explain it because I feel like I'm not going to do a good enough idea of why all the guys look the same. You know what I mean? Like, why did this character? Why are they all connected? How are they all connected? I know we mentioned Green Man earlier. That's what I thought it was about. Where Mother Nature is suddenly the male Mother Nature, which is Green Man, and that all of these men are connected, and which includes her husband. And
well, I mean, her husband was absolutely manipulative and controlling by, you know, threatening to kill himself, and like she was like
gaslighting to the extreme.
Yes, and paranoid, and she was screaming. She was like, "I have my own fucking life. Like I have my own dreams and everything. It's not all about you." And that's the way that a lot of, you know, societal like socialization has done, is where it's like, no, like when you're married, it's all about the man's career, all about the man's life, and the woman's life takes like it's a second place, and we're supposed to cater to them or whatever. And it's like, no, like they're both, their lives and their wants and the desires are both equal in it, you know. And he was just trying to like, it didn't matter what she wanted. It was just all about him, and he would do anything as far as like threatening to kill himself and all of this stuff, which is tragic and sad.
Is just so sad. And we didn't even get, you know, we only got a small snapshot like of what their relationship was, you know. And if that was the breaking point, you know, obviously what led up to that we aren't privy to, but it obviously wasn't great.
I kept thinking like, man, like his life does not override hers. They're both valid.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I will say at the very end of the movie, spoilers. I guess we should have said at the very end of the movie. I mean, we haven't talked about.
If anyone's watching this and they haven't really watched the film,
sorry.
Like I think you shouldn't really watch a podcast on a film if you haven't seen the film. So you know,
I
sorry,
agree. But at the very end of the movie, you basically this character, this Green Man-esque character, keeps rebirthing. There's a lot of focusing on the genitals, rebirthing, focusing on the genitals, rebirthing.
A lot of vagina stretching happening.
lots of that, and then which is very jarring, and I'm sure it's there for, you know, that's a cinematic thing. But the fact that he gets then the last time he rebirths is into her husband, and at the end he's like, you know, you did this to me. Why'd you do this to me? Because obviously, I mean, not obviously, but when she sees his body at the beginning of the movie, like I guess when he dies, he has a hand injury, right? Because he hits the gate on the way down. But she had stabbed this Green Man character, and those wounds are the same exact place. And so when he is reborn into the husband figure again, and he goes, you did this to me, you know, and also, do you love me? And it's just no reaction. And then movie's done. So the writer in me was like, you know, this would have been great if she just killed him right then and there. But I know that's not the purpose.
I feel like there's one thing, like in that end moment, I felt like she actually felt sad. There was like a weird feeling of sadness, of patheticness. Like each time there was a rebirth, she was kind of almost disgusted, but like pity was, you know, each time. Go again.
Yes. I'm sorry, I'm just so passionate about this. Because it's like after when you date men who over and over and over and over again that are all socially conditioned by society to be the same abusive, toxic masculinity men that, you know, have misogyny in them and they're abusive and stuff over and over again. You get disgusted and you're like, Jesus, are they all like this? And yes, I'm sorry, but like that was the point of it all, is that you know, society keeps, you know, perpetuating the cycle of continuing to create men, you know, because it's passed down and passed down and passed down from men to men to men. And that was the whole rebirthing thing. If it's like, there's another one and there's another one, because that's what it is. We just keep rebirthing the same type of socially conditioned, you know, hurtful men, regardless of the age. And that's why they were all different ages. It's like, you can see it, you can see that behavior and that toxic masculinity and all of that, and that hegemonic masculinity and all of that in men of all ages, you know. And it's like the pattern of rebirthing and rebirthing, and it's like, when is it going to ever end? Who's going to break the fucking cycle? You know, somebody needs to break the cycle.
I agree 100%. That's why, like, part of me was like, if she just killed him, but I know that she can't, because that's
not when she says, like you said just before it ends, you know, when she says to her husband, you know, like, what is it you want from me? And he stops and he goes, your love. And then it's almost like it is very like, ugh, like, it's just kind of like, at the end of the day, they're all hurt, little men who are like, who are ill-formed, and at the end of the day, all they want is like a female, whether that's supposed to be some kind of mother figure, but you know, some kind of female. It's this female love that they're, at the end of the day, all of that violence, all of that behavior, all of the, you know, everything to do with what has made them all toxic and is continuing the cycle, it all comes down to, again, their need, a need that they want that's more important than anybody else's.
Yep, absolutely.
Yep. I mean,
I'm like looking at my notes going like,
I know, I just wrote a whole bunch of notes too, where I'm like, okay, where do I bring up?
Well, yeah, and it's like they want our love, but it feels like the point is also like, well, you're going about it the wrong fucking way. Like you're not going about it the right way. Like,
it's like, I don't want your love naturally.
Isolating us, trying to control us, trying to manipulate us, all of those things, saying sexist things to us, treating us like we are just, you know, incubators for your children or whatever, or that we're these sinful like things that like sirens who just like, you know, who just like manipulate you by making you want us and making you lust us. Because when they're in when the guy's in the bathroom and he's with her and he's just like,
and he says, when did you lose your virginity?
Oh my gosh. Well, that goes back to like a whole like,
I'm like, what? A, you're a priest. B, what the fuck, dude? And like, there's so many like, what the fucks, like little. I'm always like,
it's perverse. It also goes back to like purity myths and things like that. And it also they also play on it with the virgin and the whore dichotomy, like in it, like. And it's there's just so much like feminist stuff in every aspect of it. I love it so much. I've only watched it twice, and I already want to watch it again.
Well, it's like that moment when he does say about the virginity, and then he goes, then he's, you know, saying all those verses and things, and it's like in the beginning, you know, he's almost insinuating that it's her fault that the husband is dead, and then it's all, you know, what did you do? And then it's like later on, then he starts bringing up all the like, you know, he's gone from whore and then he's gone back again. He's like talking about all this saintly kind of good women behavior, and it's a very like, again, very uncomfortable. And she lets him get so close. I was like, oh my god, he's gonna rape her. And I was like, ew, like that's really, you know.
I thought that as well. I also thought it was
so close.
Well, that's one thing I had a problem with this movie, is that it wasn't really realistic to how abusive women are react. I'm not saying all abused women are the same, but I've worked as a counselor and I've been around friends and I've been abused, but not physically, because I am the one that will stab you if you try. But I've been manipulated. Like,
did I mention that Bonnie is the showrunner for Hunter Killer? She comes up with ways to kill.
I know how to kill and get away with it.
That is her job.
So now I can't murder anyone. I'll be suspect number one. No, the abuse I had in past relationships was coercive control, which is, I'm going to do this thing to manipulate you. I'm going to threaten suicide if you break up with me. It's that sort of thing. Not necessarily physical hits. It's emotional, ripping apart my self-esteem, ripping apart my self-confidence, ripping apart who I was before. So I am only there to serve them and make their, dreams come true. And I'm secondary. And you don't even, and I'm going to say this right now for anyone in the comments who's about to be like, oh, I'm going to argue with Bonnie. Every woman is susceptible to being in an abusive relationship. It does not matter how smart you are or what your background is or any of that. If you are a woman, the likelihood that in your lifetime you may be in a relationship that is either abusive or overly controlling, and this includes women too. Like I'm bisexual. I've dated women that are also very controlling and abusive. So it's not necessarily gender specific, even though this movie is. But I will say, women that are physically hit a lot, they don't trust to be close to men. So when she was close to him physically, I'm like, that doesn't ring true. And also,
I kind of felt, though, I kind of felt that this was her own first dealings with this kind of behavior, like with her husband.
Okay.
So I felt like this, she hadn't previously been in this situation, which was, why she had I need to leave you, and was so, and I think it also feeds into what you were saying about that fear, kind of frozen stage, which I've had moments where I've been like, this is a really serious situation, and just stop for a minute. What am I going to do? And I think, like you said, you don't know what you're going to react like when you're there, but sometimes being a little passive might save your life, so I think
I tell this all the time, women, what you should care about singularly more than anything is just surviving. There's no right or wrong way. Just survive, and don't blame yourself afterwards for not being Buffy the Vampire Slayer, for not doing this. It doesn't matter. Just survive, and then from there you'll heal. But it's just this. I thought at the very end it was interesting, her reaction. And at first I was like, when I saw it the first time, at the very, very end, and I was like, why doesn't she have more of an emotional response on her face? And then I realized, oh my God, maybe this is at the end. She is so numb from all of this, that this is the perfect reaction for her to have at the end, is not horror, not crying, just numb. And I'm like, yeah, I get that now. Because it's like, if you have to deal with this, and she had to deal with this at the village, right? Having to go through guy after guy after guy, being just horrible and nasty and stupid and mean and gross. After a while, you just get numb.
Yeah.
If you're angry every single time this happens, that's exhausting. Or if you're afraid every time it happens, or if you're nervous or tense every time, eventually you're numb. And I thought, okay, that's perfect. Her response at the end was perfect.
And going back to how it was kind of sad at the end where he was like, I want your love. And it was, you kind of got that feeling that she was sad. It's like we were talking about how, I have to read this off the paper because what I wrote is good. Well, before that,
have such, like I said, meticulous notes. So I want to utilize these notes.
Scholar in me. But you know how it's like I wrote, men give birth to other toxic and shitty, scary men, all of which have the same socialization beliefs and gender disparities, the scars, the deformations of the last one. And again, the cycle of abuse, pain, misogyny, toxic masculinity, hegemonic masculinity, and the subjection of objectification of women. And all of this follows both the men and the women around perpetually. The men were also in that portrayed as being children and babies, the way that they were crying on the floor, even though they were being born as full men. They were still crying, and they were behaving as children and babies mentally and emotionally, and unable to control their actions and urges, behavior. But dialectically, it's sad that they have to be born into this, thinking that this is the way to be a man, and they can't escape that, So I felt really sorry for the guys at the end, because I was like, man, you can't.
That's what I was trying to get at earlier, with that feeling of almost sadness and pity. You're almost watching them and going, oh, this is almost embarrassing for you, dude. Because they're just total, inept babies at that end bit. They're so weak and vulnerable, and you're actually and I think tying in with what Bonnie said about her being kind of numb as well, is she's realized at this end that these are just broken, people, and she's kind of it is, it's kind of head scratching, well, there's nothing I can do in this situation. Like, you know, and you know, she doesn't get all hysterical or anything, but she just kind of just sits and ponders on it. And it's like all this crazy shit just happened. I just saw all these things come out of, you know, and all, but at the end of the day, you're all just a bunch of really broken, like these men that are just so weak and just clawing to get anything from this one woman.
And they have such false ideas of what it means to be a man, you know, like I follow this feminist author named Clementine Ford, you know, and she's been posting about
Australian.
She's amazing. Well, I love Australians. They're like,
me too.
But I follow her, and she's been posting, you know, about, you know, that guy Andrew Tate and how he's kind of indoctrinating like this younger group of men to be like misogynistic and just awful to women, you know, and so sexist. And she posted something yesterday, and I think it was yesterday, the day before, and I watched the movie right after, and I was like, oh my God, these things like go together, you know. And she said something about how like heterosexual men hone their lives around the opinions and behaviors and actions and approval of other men, and how it's almost homoerotic. How the guy was like, at one point, he's like, well, father said, you know,
I was gonna say,
and it's time to show him, you know. And it's like they do everything with this like seeking so badly of the approval that they don't realize that they're hurting women like so badly, because all they want is to be this man, you know. And their experiences with other men is often, like I said, I already said that, homoerotic. Regarding the approval of other men through their manly conquest of women and their persistent subjugation and objectification of women. And that's like, it's just sad to me that they're like, you know,
the comment on the father is a perfect example of how toxic masculinity starts really small and just grows and grows and grows.
Yeah. That's why I wish that I wish there was a universal law that all straight men have to be buddied up with a drag queen, because I feel like they would learn about women so much better from drag queens than from other straight guys.
And they come into the world, like, I mean, obviously women do too, so it's not commenting, but a lot of men come into this world with, you know, all of these standards and all of these things that their father, but not only their father, but their grandfather and their grandfather's father, all these attitudes and all of this history that they just keep passing down. And, you know, and it's like, you know, I'm trying to prove my dad right. I'm trying to prove my dad right. I'm trying, you know, and it's like,
it doesn't always have to be dads too. I mean,
no, but it's like friends. It's
like even just bad moms, like just telling them how to be men in a wrong way. It's just, you know, I also feel for guys now a little bit, because we are living in a cancel culture world. We're living in a world where women are speaking up even more than I think they were in the 70s and 80s and even the 90s. I feel like their feminism is finally, and I don't even want to call it feminism. I just want to call it women that are fucking not taking it anymore. And that's great. But it also, a lot of my straight guy friends are like, we don't even know. We don't want to flirt and get cancel culture. We don't want to do this. I'm like, we're not out to get all men. We're just not putting up with, you know, sexual assault anymore. We're not putting up with sexual harassment. We're not putting up with misogyny anymore. That's all we're doing. We're not saying you can't like ask us on a date. It's just, hey, if we say no, stop asking. You know, like, it's I think the problem too is they, you know, romantic movies also kind of set this weird precedent of, you know, it takes, I used to always say this about romance movies, that all you have to do is change the soundtrack to make it a horror film. Because I love that. Because a lot of guys pursue women in these movies and they don't take no for an answer. They think it's a challenge.
And like, I get sucked into this every time.
It's like
I get sucked into Love Actually every single time. And the other guy, what a crazy lunatic. He follows Keira Knightley to her wedding. He just doesn't stop.
I mean, if you also think of Say Anything with John Cusack holding up the boombox outside of her window, and it's supposed to be romantic, but for me, I'd be like, stalker. So it's like all you have to do is change the music slightly or change the like tone slightly. And so I think with this movie, it also kind of brought into light that yes, there's toxic masculinity that men are learning from other men, or they're learning from bad role models. There's also the incel movement. You know, there's also the movement of spread my seed everywhere. There's also the movement of I don't care if I'm sick, I'm going to get women sick too. And also religion. If you look at all patriarch religions, women don't fare well in those. I mean, it's like a lot to unpack in this movie.
There's so much, and I love what you said about, you know, that there's bad moms too, and usually those, you know, those moms are some version of internalizing the patriarchy themselves, you know, and that's, I saw that in this movie too, when the female police officer comes over and she reports it, and she's like, oh, well, you know, it's not a big deal type thing. And it's like, I'm terrified, lady. Like, why are you not taking me seriously? You're a woman.
Like, I was thinking, you know, you kind of think like, I'm on a holiday, like in a town I don't know, in a huge house by myself. Of course you're going to be frightened by a guy you've seen twice, naked, just hanging out. Like, it's not normal.
Just hanging out, literally. Yeah. Also, that cop scene reminded me a lot of the true life thing that happened to Gabby, who was a who was a YouTuber, and she was like traveling in a van with her boyfriend, and then at the end, they get on tape, on the police body cam tapes of her. Basically, passerby saw them arguing, and it looked violent, so they called the cops, and the cops stopped the van. And the man, like, they separated them. The boyfriend said, "Oh, she's just hysterical. She's just like emotional," you know, the whole usual thing that abusers say.
Stereotypes.
And was very like chummy with the police, like didn't look like an abuser, didn't act like an abuser. And then when they talk to her, she's in hysterics, she's crying. She takes it all back, because I'm sure he, like, as soon as they saw the cops, he's like, if you say anything, this is it for you. But it's like that hit me hard, because I was like, oh my God. And because there's a female cop talking to Gabby. And she's like, are you sure you're okay? And Gabby's like, yeah, I'm fine. Like, she's crying. She's not fine. Clearly, that police officer should have separated them and took Gabby away, but didn't, because the guy sweet talked the cops into just leaving. As a domestic dispute, a lot of times cops don't, I don't know why I put that in quotes. It was a domestic dispute. Cops don't know necessarily how to deal with that sometimes, because it's hard to, for them to, especially male cops, but female cops, I would have been like, so when I watched this, I was like, you are a female cop. You should know this. You should like be really like sensitive to this, and like, no, she is not okay. So don't try to talk her out of it.
Very blasé. And I thought it was interesting
that her experience. Yes. Like, come on. And
then there's like
the Gabby thing ended up very tragic. Like,
he died. He murdered her, and then he committed suicide. Like, it's not. That did not end well. That did not end well. I mean,
and it could have ended at that traffic stop. It could have ended right there, and they both would have been alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what this movie, it like brought back so many real world moments. I watch it for my job. I mean, I shouldn't say it's for my job. I'm just gonna admit it. I watch a lot of true crime, and the thing that, at least in the United States, most murders of women aren't stranger danger. It's their spouses, it's their boyfriends, it's their relatives, it's a friend of the family. It's not serial killers that everyone thinks are all over the place. It's usually boyfriends. And every time I watch a movie, something like this, I'm like, oh my God, this is real life. Like, yes, it's a horror. Yes, there's elements of supernatural. But this movie, if you're a woman and you are paying attention to reality right now, you know, abuse, stalker laws are a joke in the United States. I recently had a stalker that died, and can I tell you the amount of relief I had? He died of a heart attack, not murder. I was like horrified by this guy, because he was taking me and my friends, like harassing us on his YouTube channel. He was harassing us on social media. Took some of my friends to court. He tried to get restraining orders against them, so they would have to go to court and see him. He was using the court system to abuse women and to assault women emotionally, and he was just horrible. And so when he died, there's like a sense of relief with all of us, because there's like 10 women in this group of friends that have had to deal with this guy. I've had to deal with him since I worked at Lucasfilm, because he was an employee there. So like I had to deal with him in the work, like the work view, like having to deal with that. And then he like came to LA, and I was in LA. Like I was just like, oh shit, I'm gonna have to deal with this guy again. And so this movie brought back a lot of like not being taken seriously about stalkers. And stalkers do escalate to violence almost always. And so for women, for men against women, not always women against men, but definitely men against women, it will escalate because they know they can get away with it. They know that cops can't really do anything. I've had cops tell me that they can't do anything about a stalker unless he physically hurts me. So they have to wait until my life is in jeopardy physically. Like I have to prove that something physically happened to me before cops will take restraining orders seriously. Restraining orders don't actually do anything. They really don't. And so it's just
if someone wants to do something, they're going to. Yeah.
I know. And so watching this movie, I was like, she's being stalked, and she's being stalked by a crazy nude guy in the forest. Like to me, I'm like, oh my god, that's not cool.
No clothes on. Just like, and it was like I think everyone has some sort of story to, not exactly like yours, but has some story that crosses into those boundaries. Yeah. Like when I was 17, I had a stalker from high school, and I remember coming home one day from school and there was a message on my answering machine, and I walked in the house and my family were all staring at me, and I was like, and they're like, come in here and sit, like type thing. And I was like, okay. And then they played this message on the answer machine, and I, like, my whole face, everything just dropped. And it was like a guy saying, like, I'm going to kill you, like, and all this other stuff. And you know what the response was from everybody? The response was, what did you do?
Yeah.
Like, what did I do to make this person do that to me? And I was like, and I knew who it was. I knew, I had a pretty good idea who the person was. It was someone that was like very weird and had like, was very obsessed. And they were a little bit, frightening. And so I kept my distance from them. But he obviously really had a crush on me and took that to the next level, because I wouldn't, like, give him time. And, and the thing is, if this person had been friendly, kind, all of those things, he was an attractive person. But unfortunately, he went about things in that horrible, like really just abrasive, toxic way that actually just made you frightened, not interested. And but what got me was that moment, where everyone was like, what did you do? What did you do?
Yeah,
like, and I was like, I did nothing. Well, I existed. So is that what you're saying? Because I existed, this was my,
Yeah.
So I definitely feel what you're saying with that.
So there was a really, really creepy moment for me in it when, the guy has broken into the house, and it's the little boy, and there's there's a dead bird that flies in, and they get, and it's dead. And then there's a shot where the Maryland mask is on the face of the dead bird. And it's almost like, I don't know whether the little kid was like simulating sex with the thing, or if he was actually having sex. It looked like the bird was being fucked, right?
Something was happening. Yeah.
Something was happening there. And like, it just, it was just so creepy to me, because it just felt like so like the message in that was like, to him, women are like these dead things just to be used by men. And like, I think, yes. And it was one of the moments for me. I don't know why, because it was such a short part, but it just, like,
I think the kid was creepy, really creepy. He stuck with me throughout the whole lot as being a real creep, because I think it's probably because of the age, and because it's so insidious, like, and you kind of felt like this kid's going to become a serial killer or something, because the way he, is obsessed with that. Like, he kept talking about, hide and seek, and then everything's kind of death related, and like he had a very twisted view, you could tell, between love and death, or kind of thing.
Can I bring up something that I don't know if we want to talk about? We don't have to, but when I was watching this movie, before I watched it a second time, the trailer for House of Hammer came out, about Armie Hammer, the actor.
No, I haven't.
Trailer?
I'm not familiar with it.
Yet, no.
So the
Hammer horror films?
So the actor Armie Hammer is a real actor. He played Lone Ranger in the horrible Lone Ranger movie with Johnny Depp. He was in the most recent version of the movie Rebecca, which is on Netflix right now. He did a horror movie with Dakota Johnson called Wounds, which is on, it's like a body horror movie, kind of slightly cannibalistic zombie movie that's on Hulu. He looks like, you know, he's very symmetrical. That's my way of saying cute. He's a very good looking guy. But here's the thing. A bunch of stuff came out, I would say last year, maybe earlier, of his girlfriend's past long-term relationships where he was very abusive in the sense that he's a biter. He is a non-consensual bondage. Like, I don't want to kink shame at all, but the only reason sex kinks work is when it's consensual and you can trust your partner.
100%.
And if you plan on tying up a partner without telling them why you're doing it or getting consent, if you bite them hard and don't get consent to do that sort of thing, and some people really enjoy that, and I'm not shaming, but this was like regular girls dating this cute guy that's an actor, and he's also very wealthy because he comes from the Arm & Hammer family, the products that make Arm & Hammer. That's where that's his family. He's very rich.
Yeah,
I highly recommend watching this trailer. It's called House of Hammer. His last name is Hammer.
I just brought him up from on Vanity Fair.
It's going to be on Discovery. It's going to be on Discovery Plus. I don't know if it's a movie or a series, but it's kind of like all the women are going to be coming up and talking about it.
Wow.
And it was just, I didn't know his grandfather had abused women, and his
I just read that, but it's actually his history.
So, like, watching Men Again and putting that real world thing on about how sometimes abuse of women is not inherited, but taught from generation to generation to generation, that we are objects. We are there only for their satisfaction and pleasure. We are there to make them happy. We are there as sexual creatures, but in their realm of how they want us to be sexual creatures. It was like, holy shit, this is like a real life thing. And I'm not being Pollyanna about it. I know this happens all the time, and not just with straights. You know, obviously Kevin Spacey is a great example of that. Weinstein, Epstein, like all of that. Like
Marilyn Manson.
But it was just weird because it was.
We still aren't talking about. Can I just say,
his big thing though is that he told the women he was dating that he loved them so much he wanted to devour them. Really.
Yeah.
And he's like, he has cannibal fantasies. And so for me, I was just like, okay, once you get to cannibal fantasies.
Yeah, that's next level.
Going back, like from that. That's a dangerous, I feel like that's a bit of a danger zone. It's not like BDSM kink. Cannibalism, there's only one outcome of that. I think if you watch the movie Fresh, that was on Hulu. That was great.
That was great.
That really shows male toxicity to like the perfect, like he's like a wooer in the beginning. He's like the perfect guy. She goes home with them, and it's like, I mean, spoiler alert if you have not watched this movie, but it's cannibal. It's like
that movie. I really,
but also it's just like, it's a very good.
Maybe that's our next date, ladies.
We should watch. I think that we should, if you haven't already talked about it, we should talk about it at some point.
No, I haven't talked about it. No.
It's such a good commentary on dating. It's such a good commentary on not like trusting your gut, but also ending up with somebody you didn't expect, but how to survive that. It talks about female empowerment with other women, because she obviously has to help other women, and they have to help each other because there's a lot of women in the basement that are getting chopped up. So when I saw that movie,
I don't know why I'm smiling and laughing at the same time, guys. It's just because I'm like, I haven't actually. This is the one film that's on my list that I haven't finished yet. So here's
the thing I'm gonna say. This movie itself was a good reminder for me to praise my guy friends who aren't like this and say, hey, thank you for like either stopping the cycle if you had like a toxic father or toxic mother. Thank you for figuring it out as an adult not to treat women shittily. But it also made me realize I've had a lot of interactions with guys like this in the movie. And it's a good reminder, I think, for women to take care of themselves and to be patient with themselves. But also this movie is about grief. It's about, loss. So it's not just about, it's also about, what do you do if this happened to you? You know, what do you do with grief? What do you do with grief when no one is giving you what you need? And she doesn't get anything she needs from this movie, I don't think. I feel like there's no one helping her.
She's gone to the country to have this beautiful retreat. And this is what happens to her.
Yeah, here's my advice. If you have a husband, abusive husband that dies mysteriously, whether you killed them or whether they committed suicide or whatever, don't go to the English countryside. Go and go to the gay community in your area and hang out with drag queens until you feel better.
Yeah, don't go isolating
hang
yourself.
Out with the gays. Don't go to an isolated village full of toxic men. Don't.
Roy Kinnear.
I mean,
I would love to see him walking down the street like somewhere in England. Be like,
I know, like this is a movie that I feel like either Kinnear is going to get all the awards for because he played so many parts.
I hope he gets something for it because I really do think this must have been a really like mindfuck of a role.
Yeah,
to learn each of these characters and to just go through it, like, which he does, like he takes it on 100%.
And somebody, I saw a comment here in the little chat box. Somebody was asking our thoughts on Jeffrey and that character that he plays and how he's kind of more neutral and normal than the other ones. And I think that's you know, it's kind of a reflection of like how, you know, men can disarm us. I mean, just like we were just bringing up that movie Fresh, that guy was so charming and he was, you know, so successful and so like everything she was looking for after a series of bad dates, you know, but really he was this narcissistic psychopath. You know?
Do I need to bring up Ted Bundy?
That's what I'm watching tonight, ladies.
I mean, Ted Bundy is also a perfect example of that.
Yes.
Right? Women trusted him because he didn't look like a killer. You know, at that time, everyone's like, oh, all killers look like Manson. You know, like it's all Charlie Manson, right?
Yeah. Or they're like weird looking, big, gross old dudes or whatever.
He was like a law student, yuppie dude, and people let their guard down because he looked, I guess, quote unquote, normal of the day. And it's very much like that now. I feel like it's interesting because I have conversations with women all the time, especially my friends who are a lot younger that are using dating apps to, you know, basically have sex with strangers, which, by the way, not shaming. You could do that just as much as dudes do. I never shame about that. But the fact that they're like, yeah, he looked fine and then he was weird. And I'm like, okay, you can't judge a person by how they look. You know, psychosis is inside. It's not in your hair color. It's not in what you're wearing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You don't know how someone's going to be. That's why you have to be careful.
Yes. And in my experience, the most charming men are often the most dangerous.
Yeah.
They're the most.
They get away with it. With it. Yeah. And also
they fool everybody. They fool everybody into thinking they're this like amazing person when you're like, oh no, like what you're not seeing behind closed doors is that this man is evil.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why it's like, you know, you think about
domestic. This is why I don't do dating apps.
I'm not that trusting. And also I turn dating apps into void comp tests very quickly. So like my speed dating is more like I just try to find out how creepy they are. And then I also try to find out their ATM passwords as fast as I can to see if they realize I'm trying to get their ATM passwords. Like, let me tell you, speed dating and then saying my mom's maiden name is so weird. What's your mom's maiden name? And then you talk about first pet, and you talk about the first street you lived on. I mean, you can get everyone. I mean, come on. So I always thought that the really good looking guys that could be like male models, and they're very good at conversation, right? They're very good at disarming you. Sociopaths and psychopaths know how to talk to people. They're not like people. Yeah, they're not like weird, crazy people. They are con artists, and they're very good at getting you to feel like you're safe, getting you to feel like you're the most important person in the room, getting you to feel like, oh, I could see my life with this person. And then once you're with them, that's when things start to go haywire. And then you start to think it's your fault because it's like, what did I do wrong? This guy was fine in the beginning. What did I do wrong? And it's a mindfulness. And so you have to be careful.
Yes, and that's reflected in this movie of how there's this beautiful, like the beginning of it's so beautiful and just gorgeous and the
idyllic.
the colors are so rich and this place is so amazing. And I felt like that was kind of, you know, like the metaphor for like how these guys lure you in and everything and get you to relax and get you to open up, and then they turn into monsters.
Yeah.
And I think
that's
as well,
like you will find a killer in real life more probably like at a Starbucks than you will at a haunted house.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And just like the comment about Jeffrey as well, like I was going to say, I felt like, you know, he was neutral because he was trying to be that main sort of thing there, and he was like, he kept reeling her back, like in that end, at the end when he came in before the whole bird scene happened, he was like, right, I'm gonna go do this, you know, like it's my thing, I need to look in the house. Yeah. And she does, what does she do? She follows him behind, you know, really eagerly going, no, don't. And it's like, oh no, she's sucked in again. Like, so he keeps her in her position almost. So while he seems neutral and nice, he's actually kind of like the anchor that's keeping her, like, you know, kind of blinded, because each time she, you know, kind of feels comfortable, and then that's when all these things start happening again.
That's so reflective of real life experiences with these sociopathic, you know, sad men.
Yeah. And I think, you know, and I've had a few incidences with like incel type men that it's completely hidden. You would never know. And then, you know, and then all of a sudden, you know, before you know it, like a guy asked me out, and I like, you know, on Facebook, and was like, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, look, you know, I'm not really interested at the moment or whatever. And his response went from this kind of like chatter to severe, like so aggressive and defensive. And he was like, oh, and straight away, then his reply was started with "women like you."
Yeah.
Here we go.
Oh, boy.
And I was like,
the phrases "women like you" or "those people" are too. If I hear that, I'm just like, I'm gone. I'm not talking to you. Whether it's
I was like, I'm out.
You know?
I was like, yeah. I just straight away didn't look. And then I went back and like looked afterwards, because like, this guy's still typing away in there and I'm not even paying attention. And then I looked at it and I was just, oh my God, just the drivel. Yeah. And it was like, that's just, you know, like I was like, wow. And like, you know, I think Jenna said earlier, like, that's not going to turn you to want to be with them. If anything, you just showed me all of the terrible things like that are underneath your skin. Now I want nothing to do with them ever. Like, you know.
I don't know if you guys watch the series You.
I started watching the first one, and
that's very interesting.
Yeah, I think both of you, like I haven't seen the whole thing, but I started the first one, and I felt really uncomfortable almost through the whole thing. Yeah. And then I couldn't watch it anymore. And then I've heard so much has changed.
I'll tell you. He's so charming. He's so charming.
So charming.
Oh, but he's so pure, yeah.
And again,
right in.
Again, change the soundtrack. It's a rom-com. And they even say that. They even say that in the first season where he's like,
I thought like the way that everybody like now, like everyone, like whenever I talk about it, people are like, oh, it's so good, and like they're really into it. And I'm like, it's almost backfired. It's a story that's meant to be not great, and then it's kind of gone. Now everyone is like, you know, obviously I haven't gotten to
watch all of it.
Yeah, the series.
I'm just gonna tell you, I'm not gonna say necessarily it will change your mind, but for me, same thing. First few episodes, I'm like, this seems
like
wrong.
It was like lives in New York with their blinds wide open. Do people do that? I was like, it's New York. I don't think people just have their blinds wide open.
Not always.
I lived
in New York for a while. I didn't have my blinds.
In England, they do. I've seen it in the rich suburbs. They do
that. I will say, watch the first season, then watch the second season, because he goes from New York to LA. I mean, I don't know if you want to agree on me with this, but it's very LA. Like watching that second season, I was like, oh yeah, that's LA. It was also very prophetic, because there's a comedian character who basically grooms young women fans and then rapes them. Played by an actor / comedian who does that in real life, and they found out.
And I think we all know who you're talking about. I do.
I don't think I do, but I need to know. You're gonna have to tell me later.
watch second season of You. It's the comedian / actor
he's
that is
actually in it, right.
basically texting young women, and it was supposed to be like a Franco James Franco type character, but literally this guy in real life got caught doing that after second season happened, and it was huge. But I will say the third season's interesting because then you get female rage, and I think that is interesting. I don't want to spoil the season for you by giving you. But I will say female rage is addressed very well in second and third season. But here's the thing. He's a perfect example of a gorgeous guy who seems to have his shit together, but he's fucking psycho. And he thinks women are there to fall in love with him. And when they don't, he gets weird and creepy and violent, and you know what I mean? So it's like, it's a weird version. In a glass box? Well, it's a weird version of being an incel, because a lot of times when you think of incel, you just think of Gamergate mouth breathers in their basement. You don't think of like hot guys who have their shit together.
Well, I definitely learned.
You know what I mean? You think of guys who
incels are no longer just nerdies on their computer behind the keyboard.
It's like incels aren't guys who can't get dates. It's incels who think that the most gorgeous woman in the world should date them.
Yeah.
And when they don't, they're like, and I'm not saying they're going above their, rank and file. Because let's be honest, I'm not going to try to woo Cumberbatch. I know my limits, but like incels tend to, as far as my experience has gone, is that they tend to go for the hottest person, the most unreachable woman.
Realistic, yeah.
And then when that woman turns them down, they don't know how to deal with rejection. And they don't realize this is just part of being human. You get rejected constantly. I'm a writer. I've been rejected since like junior high. Like I know what, and also I was a nerd. I had braces as a weirdo. I liked like death shit and goth and taxidermy and stuff. Like I had no chance of getting anyone I wanted. But you know what? I never thought I should kill them because they didn't say yes to prom. I never thought that way. But these types of people, they think they are entitled to whatever they want, and when they don't,
I think that's the key word for this entire movie. Really, is this sort of sense of entitlement.
Yeah,
100%.
Like,
that's what they should call the movie.
All of these things, but the woman in the scenario is never entitled to her own space.
Yeah. Right, and even like her, it's I don't know how to say it right. I get so excited. I'm sorry, you guys.
Okay. I love it.
But like it shows you how like her anger and her rage and her actions are not accepted by society, or but we're supposed to just accept when men, that because that's their natural, they're allowed to be angry and everything like that, but not women.
Yeah. Anytime a woman is ambitious, they're considered aggressive. Anytime a woman speaks her mind, it's bitchy. Whereas it's assertive for men. I mean, this happens in the workplace, right? You say what you want in a meeting, you are problematic and troublesome and not a team player. A guy says it, they're leadership material. Yep. And it's like, we have to deal with that in the workplace. We have to do that in dating. We have to do this in our families, in our relationships, in our friendships. And it's exhausting, but also it's like up to us to teach everyone, this is not okay. And I'm tired of
like everything. Both of you touched on it, both of you definitely.
I'm glad that movies like this are being made,
Me too.
And Midsummer and everything, that I think that there's lessons to be learned in them. And there's a lot of eye-opening in them where it's like, oh, I never thought about it from that way for a lot.
And written by guys. And written by men.
Yes. I mean, we talked about X like, a month ago. Written by a man again.
Oh, by the way, did you see the trailer for Pearl?
I did not watch it. I don't like trailers.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Okay,
I haven't. I watched it very quickly and like sped over it, and then I was like, okay.
I won't say anything that happens in the trailer because I don't want to spoil it for you. But it was good.
Okay, I'm excited to watch it. I am.
We definitely have to reconvene for that because
I agree.
It's our part 2, is it?
I feel like we kind of digressed a little bit away from.
We did. We need to come.
I'm sorry.
Bring it back around.
It's awesome. I love our banter. It's amazing.
You just go round and over.
Well, I think you are amazing women, and I'm really honored to be a part of this whole group thing.
Thank you.
Little warm fuzzies.
Equal appreciation.
I do want to go back to the film and talk about like the cinematography.
Yes, please.
It was so beautifully shot and so well done. Like there were just, and the music and everything. It was just, I can't talk enough about it. Like, and at the beginning of it, it's like there's all these vibrant reds and greens, and she has this short dark hair, and I just had this like, oh, it's reminding me of Amelie, you know, with like that whimsical kind of like coloring and everything. But it quickly became apparent that this was not an Amelie type movie.
Yeah. Well, when I was listening to it, there was like certain parts that seemed quite. I was like, oh, this is kind of. Yeah, there was that sinister kind of thing going on where it seemed all angelic and then kind of was turning. And then I remember thinking, who did this? And I waited, and then I was like, oh, of course. It was it's Jeff Barrow from Portishead.
Oh my God, I love Portishead so much.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was like, because I think I mentioned I lived in Bristol. And so Jeff Barrow lives in Bristol too. And he has his record company there and whatnot. And a couple of my friends work with him. So I didn't know much about him. I only know because I love Portishead, but I never got so far into it that I knew everybody's name and, all that sort of jazz. And then when I went to Bristol, he just kept being flung in my face all the time.
Wow.
All around. And I'd turn up to a record shop and he'd be DJing and I'd be like,
nice.
Yeah, and stuff like that. So, but yeah, when I was like, this is sort of familiar. It's got this ambient kind of, and then this like, whatnot. And then I looked at it and I was like, oh, it's friggin' Jeff Barrow. Now it all makes sense. Because usually I find it's Jeff Barrow, like someone in that realm, or you've got Clint Mansell or, the Johannesson guy. Like they're just so good at doing soundtracks.
And it really is a testament to making the movie even better. I think I'm a horror fan through and through, to the point where I will watch even the crappiest horror film.
Same.
The crappiest like Kickstarter, Indiegogo project that's on Amazon Prime Video. I will watch it. And the thing that always gets me is this is such a good story, and this would be so much better if A, they paid money to actually have someone score it, and B, they cared about sound design. And I think with this movie, there's so many good sound design elements too. Like I will say when she screams hello into the tunnel. I
love the way that they use that too, and throughout the whole movie.
The sound design in the movie, it's just got me. But I would say the cinematography, and I'm a cinematography snob a little bit with horror film that are folk horror, and I consider this folk horror because of Green Man. It's isolated in the countryside. But I'm finding, I don't know if this is just an A24 thing, because A24 is just putting out so many beautiful movies, beautifully shot movies, that I love horror films that are folk horror that are shot well. Like, I mean, The Witch, obviously, Ritual, which is one of my favorite movies, just creature design, but also it's just beautifully shot in the forest. Any kind of forest horror.
Ben's favorite.
It's
the way they're shot is just so good. Like,
it's so beautiful.
I hate using the word like elevated horror, but I do understand, like, and I do think it's fair to say that in the last couple of years we have seen this kind of art house, cinematography coming into horror, where it's, I think, and taking different elements of it and kind of.
Where it's beautiful, to watch. Like I think the most recent Hansel and Gretel movie.
Someone was telling me about that. Actually,
watch that.
Oh, it's so.
No,
good.
Me neither. But someone actually pulled me up, and someone I wouldn't have expected, and was like,
sometimes I watch it,
and I was like,
I watch it with the sound off because it's pretty. Like it's pretty to watch. It's like how Blade Runner is to me. I've watched Blade Runner at least once a week since I've been 16. So it's like,
wow.
But that movie's beautiful.
A lot of Harrison Ford, but that's okay. I love Harrison Ford.
Here's the thing.
I never tire of him.
I don't watch it for him. I watch it for Rachel. I'm there for Sean Young.
Oh, yeah. I've been in love with Harrison Ford since I was a child.
Yeah, that movie is an ASMR movie for me. So it's like the music. I think it's the music and the sound design get it too. But any movie that pays attention to cinematography, especially horror films, right? It's very easy to make a horror film and just be a slasher or just be scary or just be this. but when you give something beauty and horror, it's perfect.
Well, it becomes a work of art. It becomes it's not just something for like shits and giggles or for, you know, jump scares or to like get you excited or to like make out with your date or anything like that. You know, it becomes like a work of art. And that's the way I felt about this. The shots in the woods. And then when they had the part that really got me was when there was a single dandelion. I guess I don't know. I call it a fluff. The single dandelion fluff. You know, it like hangs in the air when she's like running back, and then it comes into focus and it falls. And
I mean, is that when she kind of does a freeze and falls backward?
Well, no, that was later on. There was 2 dandelion moments like that, and then there was also a dandelion moment with a deer. So when it holds in the air and then it falls, I just had this like, it just made me feel like perhaps it was like a symbol of hope and love and like wishes like drifting away, you know, and how we have this hope when we fall in love, we idealize it and then it's not what it appears to be, you know, and it dissipates or it floats away and it just escapes us, even though like it's right there in front of us hanging like, and it's just
so many. They used everything like that very well.
They did. And there's like, and how like we have this hope and we have this idealized version of love, especially women, you know, because it's ingrained in us from childhood, marriage and this romantic, like, you know,
Prince Charming, the whole thing.
Yes. And how it's so direct, like directly opposed to what a man's like kind of perception generally is of love, which is control and domination and power over the woman, you know. And this also I feel like was really apparent in the shot of the dead deer, because the dandelion fluff goes in. Oh no, I just lost my second page. No, okay, I found it. Okay, I mixed up my so yeah, the dandelion fluff goes into the eye of the recently deceased deer, and then the deer is seen rotting and decayed after. You know, and that just like, I don't know, that the imagery in that just like really stuck with me afterwards. I just like,
when I rewatched it last night, I got to that scene and I was just sitting there staring at it. I didn't even, you know, when you just kind of go in a zone, and I was like, oh, whoa. Like it just, you know, and I was just thinking, not only has he managed to craft an amazing story, but he's also like created this kind of world and this imagery that just really is engrossing. Because I was just like floating off with it.
Man comes and he blows the dandelion fluffs into her face, and that's what you're talking about. She leans back. And to me, it felt like it was like the man putting the spell on the woman. That's not necessarily real.
Yeah.
It's like, it was just, I loved all of that so much. I really did. I loved the shots in the fort. Like it was just so beautiful. Like even the scary parts were really beautifully shot.
They were definitely.
Yeah. I mean, even I probably, you know, like body horror is probably not my number one when it comes to horror, but this one I was kind of like, I didn't feel like it was super gross. Like it was kind of, you actually felt like you were kind of going along rather than it wasn't so like, like sometimes I find body horror.
I was fascinated. I could not.
I was like genuinely like, what's happening?
In that movie theater, and I was just like, I didn't even blink. I was just like, wow.
What is going on?
Wow. And like,
I know that after I watched this movie twice, I want to like go back and watch Annihilation now.
Oh, me too. I love that one.
Because the movie was so complex. And again, it's based off a very complex book, but the way that this director, who's the same director for this movie, reimagined the book or interpreted the book was very beautifully done. Femininity is talked about this a lot. Failed relationships come up a lot. It's such a beautifully shot movie, but also how he uses nature for metaphors, especially one of the characters who kind of then turns into this like beautiful plant kind of thing. It's interesting too, because it's a sci-fi movie, but it doesn't feel like one because it's horror as well. You know, it's very beautifully shot. I mean, it's one of those movies too that I don't think a lot of people understood.
I don't think that one. I think that skipped a few people as well. But I even felt when I watched this and then looked back at what I've seen and watched of Alex's, and I was like, wow. I was like, because I loved Ex Machina when it came out.
Me too.
I was in awe. That was the first movie where I fell in love with Domhnall Gleeson, the redhead.
Have I been pronouncing that movie wrong this whole time? I keep calling it Ex Machina.
I do the same. I call it that too.
Well, it could be because I'm Australian and I'm weird. It could be. I just assume everything you say is wrong. So
I don't know.
I'm saying it right.
It's all interpretation, right? I think it's fine either way. I think it's just
that's just how we say. Like we're not as like when we say things. It's probably Ex Machina, you know.
Well, I have a bad habit of mispronouncing things that I wish I didn't have. I'm always horrified at myself. I'm always just like, oh man,
it just depends. It just depends on where you're from. I'm from rodeo country, and I refuse to call Rodeo Drive. I call it Rodeo Drive.
Yes, I'd say rodeo too.
Drive. I was born and raised here.
Yeah, and I was born in rodeo, so it's like, see, it's all about experience and background. That's all that matters.
Yeah. Thank you.
But we tend to say things. Australians tend to say things exactly how they look.
Yeah.
So it'd be like it's a machina. You know what I mean? Like we always forget all those little words. Like
I think it's fine.
Not going to sound so much cooler.
I just had a fear right there. I was like, oh man, if I've been pronouncing this one wrong.
No. I think you guys are in the right, and we just
like
make up our own thing.
It's like, is it GIF? Is it GIF? Is it GIF? Is it GIF?
Well,
it's the guy who said GIF, right? The GIF, sorry. The guy who created it. He said, I remember because I get in this argument all the time because I say Jiffy Pop quite a lot. And I'll be like, oh, little Jiffy or whatever. And the guy who created it said it is meant to be GIF. That's how he meant it.
Yeah, fuck him. I'm gonna say GIF.
You still did it wrong, whatever.
I say GIF. Okay, I got that one right.
Yeah. Ex Machina, Ex Machina. Anyway.
I think it's just because I read a lot. And I don't use a lot of these words in conversation daily or anything like that. And I mispronounce them in like interviews or something. And I see the comments where people are like, oh, she just said that. That doesn't matter. Stupid. And I'm just like, oh man.
People care about the pronunciation and what you're trying to say, then that's on them.
It's all about intention, man. It's intention.
Exactly.
But, what I was saying is if you kind of go back, like I feel like you can kind of almost see the maturation towards getting to men if you start back and go along.
Yeah, and even Annihilation, there's moments as well.
Yeah, it's like a journey almost you can see in his filmmaking when you go back and start again.
He's really talented, like really talented, like holy crap.
It's kind of
I loved all of those. I've loved all of his movies, like all three of those, and I'm just like, I'm sure he has other ones that I don't know about, maybe.
But it's also interesting to see that because I think as film lovers, we start to see that, especially with directors doing these unusual movies, like whether it's Ty West, whether it's Jordan Peele, whether it's Ari.
Oh my God, Jordan Peele! Don't get.
I mean, come on.
I haven't seen Nope yet. I haven't seen it.
No, I haven't either.
But
and
I love
female horror directors. You start to see more and more female horror directors and screenwriters come about. And it's just interesting because I thought about this pretty hard. A man wrote and directed this. How different would it have been if it was a woman? Would it be different? Would it be a more like what kind of take would that have been? I just think I always think about that. Like how would this be different? It's like if David Lynch hadn't done Twin Peaks and Ava did it instead, what would that have been like?
So I've never seen Twin Peaks, and everyone tells me that I would love it, and I got to get on that.
I will tell you, it's weird, it's artistic, and everyone gets something different from it. So I think you would like it.
I think I'm going to start that this week because
I think you would like it. I loved the original Twin Peaks, but I can't say I've fallen for the later, newer things that
I would say the original.
I'm going to start at the beginning.
Yeah, the very beginning, and all of that. Like, I used to slink out of my room and like climb, and look through the couch to watch it because it was on TV and everyone was like, ooh, it was like
I didn't watch it in a boiler room in my college. So like I even had the serious because it was the only TV I could find that didn't have football on it. So I got to watch it was like in a really creepy room.
It was on the news like every day. I was like a teenager and it would be like on the news being like, there was blah, blah sex scenes and there was this and that. It was when all that stuff started happening in TV.
Yeah. And it was the 90s. So you have to remember, 90s TV was not ready for Twin Peaks at all. It was the first of its
Well,
kind.
I remember I'd get told off if I would sneak through and listen to 90210 because Kelly got raped or whatever, and it was like, you can't.
Oh yeah, they kept killing off the gay characters in that series too. It's like, oh, there's a gay character in love, burn them. Yeah, it was just like, come on. No, I will say Twin Peaks. If you're going to start with the TV series, then watch Fire Walk with Me, which is the movie that bridges it. And then this revival series that was on Showtime, it's not going to answer any questions for you, but you'll get another flavor of what Twin Peaks, these characters, what happened to them 20 years later.
I really like things that don't give me all the answers. I like stuff to be left to interpretation. I don't like everything to just be completely explained. I actually get annoyed when things are fully explained. I love the ending of Men because a lot of people, I guess, would probably think that it just ends abruptly and they're like, what? There's no resolution. There's no like.
I like that.
I love that.
Yeah.
I feel like no resolution is actually generally what is real.
Yes, it's real.
Like, there isn't always resolutions.
You don't need resolution for everything. You don't.
Well, I think that
sometimes you never get in life. You never get them. You don't get clarity.
There is no tied end. You know.
And I think that you made a really good point about how this was made by a man, and what if it was made by a woman? Like this man basically made this film that says like this perpetuation of these type of men and everything like that, and that all men are kind of complicit in it, and like that's so impressive to me to come from a man and not a woman.
I know, because I remember looking and going, Alex Garland. I was like, because sometimes I'm terrible with remembering names, and I remember thinking, and then I just sat there for a moment and I was like, is this a woman, like someone I haven't heard of? And then I was like, oh, it's Ex Machine, blah, blah. And I was like, damn, this guy's good. Like,
he's taking some like gender and women's studies classes or something.
Yeah, I was like, dude, this guy's good.
Also, just speaking of Lynch, but briefly, his daughter, Jennifer Lynch, made a great movie called Boxing Helena, which was also a movie that was not received well by men or women. It was about a man who he basically got rejected by this girl over and over again. He basically kidnaps her and then slowly turns her into was the Venus de Milo, where he's like, takes off her legs, takes off her arms, like to keep her in this box. And I think it's way ahead of its time, because it is about incels. It is about guys who can't take no for an answer, but it's also about women and how they survive and how they also can still gain a foot over, even though technically it's not a foot, but you know what I mean? It's like, it's a very polarizing movie, but I tend to like polarizing horror films because the reason they polarize us is because A, we're not being spoon-fed, B, we have to have an opinion that's maybe controversial, and C, we don't get answers the way we normally get answers when there's other mainstream horror films that maybe spoon feed you and give you like, unless they want a sequel and they leave you with a cliffhanger. A lot of movies, I think a lot of American movies, I don't know if they're still like this, but I think there was a whole generation of them that were a little kind of just popcorn, which is nothing wrong with that, but popcorn movies that like had a beginning, middle, and end.
And they wrap everything up all tidy.
Everything gets wrapped up. All your questions are answered. It's like a Scooby-Doo thing, right? Like you pull the mask off the killer and you're like, oh, of course it's so-and-so. Like you get this resolution. And I think there was a horror film movement at the time where people wanted endings. Like they wanted to feel safe at the end. I prefer to have horror movies where I'm like, oh shit, what just happened? Why didn't I get any answers? And I don't feel safe at all. And it's unnerving, and I like unnerving horror films, and this wasn't unnerving.
I love it when something makes you think and you finish it and you just like sit there and you're like questioning and you're thinking about all these thoughts, and to me that's a good film. That's a good storytelling.
I want to see again because I'm afraid I missed something. Like that's to me that's a compliment. To me that's like, it doesn't mean the movie's confusing. It means, holy shit, this was so good. I want to watch it again because I bet you there's
probably hidden nuggets that we've missed somewhere. Yeah. Because I forgot as well, like because of the priest as well, like totally forgot that like Alex is a atheist.
Oh,
and he said that most of his, well, pretty much everything he writes is also from an atheist perspective because that's how he views things. which maybe, and I was thinking, the idea of having the priest and religion was obviously very
intertwined,
a particular choice, like to have that in there. And I think it was also I feel like it was a conscious choice to have the female cop, because there are only 3 women in this film.
Yeah.
Cop, her friend, and Harper.
Which is also a bit unnerving.
Yeah, the only women in the film.
It's also interesting though that the friend shows up and she's pregnant.
Yes, when she comes out, you know what? The first thing I thought of, I don't know why, but it was like, what's her name? Beautiful Sharon Tate. I was just thinking, oh no, she's gonna get stabbed, or something horrible is gonna happen to her.
Why do we always think that in horror films? As soon as someone pregnant shows up, they're either gonna be
because it usually does.
They're sacrificed or something. It's like
yeah, but yeah, she was, and we had no idea she was pregnant until that second, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah,
because we never saw her partner. She never, mentioned anything that she was just like, oh yeah, we're gonna party, and I'll watch you get drunk, but she didn't really mention it. But it was. I was like, when I rewatched it as well, the bar scene. Everybody has, if you watch it again, everyone has really horrible, like, bitchy faces on.
Oh yeah,
like the worst. Like, we're just doing that pan at the beginning when nothing's even happened yet, and then you see the 2 guys in the back of the bar, and they're both like, oh, they've just got the worst faces on. They just look like brutal assholes. And she.
Sorry, go ahead. No, go.
Oh, that was it. I was just like, he's already just setting up this whole pub that's just full of.
Did you guys?
Guys.
Did you guys also get like the feeling that there's like an animosity towards women from the men, because we are like the life bringers and we are the ones who create life and who give birth?
Yeah, because like that was the vibe I got, like when they did the scene to the pub. It was like all the men were like almost like disgusted as she walked in.
Yeah.
Like all watching her.
It's the power.
Disgruntled.
It's the power of, I mean, this is the thing, right? It's the power of women can give life and men can't. And even though they're, part of the process, we're the ones carrying the creature. We're the ones in charge. We're the ones that have the control.
And we have the power to feed them too, like all by ourselves, which is like, it's kind of amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing, but it's also, it's interesting too, because, you're playing upon the virginal prototype, but also the mother prototype. And then it's also like, there's just so much wrapped into it. It's interesting too, because I am a woman who chose not to have children, and it doesn't make me less of a woman because I didn't choose to have kids. I just didn't want kids, and I don't want to be pregnant. And I have motherly instincts. It's just towards animals, not children.
I was gonna say cats. Cats and dogs.
Let's say I could have a dog. And so for me, that's an interesting dynamic, right? I have all this power, but I choose not to use it. But here's the thing: if you go back and learn about witchcraft history and learn about matriarchal societies, menstruation blood is the most powerful blood used in spells. We're connected to the fucking moon. Like, we have so much power in so many other ways that men, they will never understand that. They will never be part of that. And I think because of that, they're jealous. And because of their jealous, they want the control. And that's what I see in a lot of horror films, especially, is that lack of control over, we have control over some pretty huge ass things that they never will be a part of.
Well, and wasn't that how kind of, I took a women in religion class, and in it they talked about how, the Christianity was kind of formed based on Thomas Aquinas and his love of Aristotle's viewpoints, and how Thomas Aquinas thought that women were basically incubators, and that it was the sperm that gave the life to it, and it wasn't the women. We were just vessels for their power. And that just speaks to his insecurity and how he had to kind of help to create this, the Catholic Church and everything, which basically gives all of the power to the man, which is why
which is funny, because it takes solstice celebrations and turns it into religious celebrations that have male at the center when it was female. Though I do want to add one thing, so it's not something that happens in the comments. I'm not saying in order to be a woman that you have to have the actual biological way to have women. I think trans women are just as much women as me. You know what I mean? Like, I just want to say that over. I have to say that over and over.
100%.
Anytime I talk about women, and yes, they can't necessarily menstruate and give birth like the women that born women, but let's be honest. Like, being a woman is much more than that. And if you're trans and you identify as woman, you're a woman. You don't have to like prove it to anybody. You know what I mean?
Yes, and what a woman is has changed throughout history,
Oh, yeah.
depending on the culture. I mean, before the nuclear family and everything like that, there were more communal families and matriarchal societies. And if you look at like indigenous cultures, there's a lot of matriarchal as well. And before there was ever a sky god that was worshipped, that was male, it was the great goddess that was worshipped. And those like carvings and stuff that they found actually like predate any of that. So.
And to me, like, trans women
is so much. Being a woman is so much, and it's
so much more. But also, trans women are fighting to be women, and they're fighting to be a demographic that is notoriously mistreated and victimized, and they still want to do it. And to me, it's like, holy shit, you're probably fighting to be more of a woman than I am. But at the same time, things are changing in such a cool way right now, where people are not being defined by their gender. They are not being defined by their sexuality. They're not being identified by their physical form. I feel like because of that, movies like Men are interesting, but I'd like to see what happens in 10 years or 20 years from now. What kind of movie will we get that's not even going to have anything with specific, I don't want to say traditional gender roles, but like historical, whatever people are, the mainstream is used to, because now I feel like everything's coming into the mainstream, and it's such a cool time to be alive. But it's also an interesting time as an artist and as a creator of storytelling that I am just very excited to see what the next phase is going to be. But I just wanted to say that because I didn't want people to think I was J.K. Rowling the situation, because I
no, I love everything that you're saying so much. My soul right now. I am a very big advocate for trans rights.
Me too.
It's really, really important to me, you know. And even though this movie does have this kind of binary of the traditional gender roles and all of that, and there's also during the birth, it's very hermaphroditic. Like, it's very like,
it's 100%. Yeah, like you know the scene where I don't know, like there's a scene where he's like kind of there, and I'm like, well, his genitals are front and center, and then
it is right.
And then in less than 5 minutes, it's like, now we have a vagina.
Yeah.
Here's the fun thing. Most gods from different cultures, whether it's Druid, whether it's Asian, whether it's Greek, whatever, a lot of it is men giving birth. There are gods. I mean, I think Loki gives birth. I mean, not Hiddleston. That would be
no, come on now.
An episode of Loki. But like, if you watch, if you go back to traditional folklore Loki, forest Loki, he gives birth. A lot of different gods have given birth that are male, or they're both sexes are represented. And I find that interesting because it's something that I don't think gets explored as much as it should in movies and in storytelling and in horror, especially. I think it would be a great place to have more and more of that. But when I saw this movie, I was like, oh, this is Green Man. Because he's a god, he can do that. Because he's a supernatural entity, he can do that. And it's not like traditional birth, right? It's a rebirth of the same man over and over. It's symbolic, but also you're actually seeing it. But I found that to be an interesting take, because that's not something I was expecting. I was not expecting that to happen, because there's no hint of it in the trailer. So you're just like,
no, there's no. I was just fascinated. And, it's really interesting too, because this movie plays, like I said, it plays on the binaries of gender roles. And, and just one or the other type, for people who don't know binary, one or the other, whether it's male or female, but, both gender and biological sex are not necessarily one or the other. There is, what I think we learned in my gender and culture class, that there are 1,600 different genetic anomalies, basically, in between specifically male or female that are intersex. And it's like, and I just think it's so crazy that, like, in our society right now, we're talking so much about how, like, no, it's one or the other. And it's like, no, even biological sex, just like gender is a spectrum, just like sexuality, it's a spectrum. Everything isn't just so cut and dry. And it's not it's not just like that in human beings. It's like that in all sorts of nature.
Oh yeah.
All sorts
of there are so many animal species that either both or one way or another. Also, there's asexual, there's like so many different in actual nature, like so many different, I was reading, before I get sidetracked, I was reading that we
I think you already did, but
yeah, I'm just gonna spit it before I lose my point. I read this amazing paper that said eventually, probably hundreds of years, women will evolve to the point where we won't need sperm in order to reproduce. And basically women will be able to do so without the help of males. That's which I found interesting. But anyway,
I mean, personally, I'd like the opposite to happen. I would like it to, we no longer give birth, guys do, because then we wouldn't have to worry about abortion law.
Yeah, true that.
Because I tell you, if guys could get pregnant instead of women, there would be.
Oh yeah, it'd change very quickly.
You could get an abortion at Starbucks.
Oh yeah, there would be drive-through abortions. 100%.
I was going to say there'd be drive-through clinics.
Yeah, you can get a frappuccino and a morning after pill and be fine. You know what I mean? Like, I just feel like.
And I do want to be clear with all of this. Like, I know that we are talking a lot of a lot of things about toxic masculinity and everything. That I love men. I love men. I am bisexual. I love men. I love women. But I think that it would be irresponsible of people to ignore that these issues exist.
Exactly.
Oh, 100%. I think that's important. And in order to make, we're talking about a society here that has been so indoctrined in this behavior, and I think for us to then just dismiss it, we're never going to stop the cycle from continuing. And it's not just, we're not talking about just men or their friends or their brothers or their sons. We're talking like mothers as well. We're talking sisters. We're talking aunties. It's us as well. Like
we're talking about
everybody to ensure.
Yeah, and the way that women are socialized to basically tear each other down and to compete with each other and to fight with each other and always be jealous of each other. Like, there's all this other stuff on the female side of it as well.
Like it's what I always called toxic femininity. Like I hate that women feel that they need to tear other women down, but there's this kind of tearing apart of women that again comes from this patriarchy.
Well, it also comes from being a child. Like I wrote a book called Girls Against Girls, and it's for preteens and teenage girls on how to deal with girl on girl manipulation and bullying and mean girl stuff. But it's also like how not to turn into the monster while you're fighting the monster.
While you're doing it, yeah.
Also how to understand the monster, because a lot of it stems from insecurities or abuse at home. Or all this other things that a lot of time has nothing to do with you at all. And I think when you're a young girl, you learn this bad behavior and then you bring it into adulthood, as far as like ripping women to shred, competing with women, doing the cold shoulder, doing the ghosting, doing the competition for attention. It starts at such a young age. And, I feel for parents, because I am not a parent. So I'm not going to say it's all the parents' fault. I think it's just, in general, society has to change. I think in general, women have to change how they raise their children and how they raise their nephews and nieces. You could be a good aunt. You could be an Auntie Mame and really set a good example. You don't have to just be a mom to do that, or a dad.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's teachers. It's everybody.
It's everybody. Yeah. And you're going to come across that no matter what your background is. You are going to come across toxic women relationships, because unfortunately that's just the norm. And it's just something like, how do you deal with it? How do you not perpetuate it? How do you not also have bad behavior fighting that situation or dealing with it? And it's interesting to see how movies are starting to kind of talk about that. I mean, we of course we have the movie Mean Girls, and you have the other movies like that. Like you have series like Yellow Jackets, and you have The Wilds.
Oh, Yellow Jackets.
I mean, there's so many great shows about women relationships, especially that start young, and then competition and survival and what have you. But it's interesting too, because a lot of that is perpetuating bad male behavior as well, because they see it as like we're fighting over them and they expect it. And when it doesn't happen, they get mad, or they are the ones perpetuating it because they like women fighting over them or whatever. So it's a rich tapestry of fucked up behavior.
It is. I wanted to read you guys this cool quote that I found from Alex Garland about Harper and, the concept of seeing, all the men as one. So I'll just read that. So one question might be if Harper sees all men as the same, because neither Harper nor the film ever remark on it, ever. Only the viewer is left to remark on it. So is it that Harper sees all men as the same whilst they are in fact different? Or is it all men are the same and she does not see that? They're two questions that sound very similar but have completely different inferences.
Wow.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that was what his response to that.
I guess it just depends what lens you're examining it from.
Which I think is also quite smart, because he's right. There is two ways you can kind of view it depending on your situation and where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Especially if you're coming from a historical traumatic situation. Sometimes all men do start to, in your brain, all men start to look alike, act alike, seem alike. There's trust that's lost. And I think when you lose trust, you lose the patience to care about distinction. It happens. Like I know that for me personally, I've had moments where I'm like, I don't want to be around men. I don't want to talk to them. I don't want to hear them explain things to me. I don't need their opinions. And there are other times when I'm like, okay, I need to be a better human. Like, this is about humanity, not about gender T or whatever.
Gender T.
It's not about being one or the other. It's about being a better human. I was wondering about that too. The quote that you just said about Harper. Like, I did wonder, wouldn't it be interesting? And this is just me rewriting because I'm a writer. Wouldn't it be interesting at the end of the movie? You see the village and they're all different men, but we had watched it just from her perspective. So she just kept seeing the same guy over and over because of trauma of dealing with an abusive spouse that then died. Like, that would be an interesting, because he doesn't change until her husband at the end, right? I think it maybe even be better if the whole movie was just her husband over and over and over again, but that might be too on the ball. Like, that might be a little too telling. But I do like this idea that she can't tell a distinction of the men. And that's an interesting take.
And I think also like how quickly that can happen. And you don't even realize it, or,
So I have a question for both of you. I'd love your opinion on this. When they're doing the rebirthing and the rebirthing and the rebirthing, all the time it's like a vagina opening here and a vagina opening on the back, but the last one when I'm sorry.
Did you ever think we'd be having this discussion? Vagina on the front, vagina on the back.
And it's not, it's also vulva and like labia.
There is labia there.
It's all there. But on the last one, when it births her husband, it comes out of the mouth.
Yes.
And I was just wondering if you guys had any like perception on what the meaning behind that was, because me and my sister watched this last night together and she hadn't seen it before. And she was enthralled with the whole thing. She's amazing. But after the end of it, she's like, well, why did her husband come out of the mouth, but the other ones were birthed out of like a birth canal? Like, it was, it was more like, why? I have so many questions about that.
I wondered that too. And I wondered if maybe he was birthed out of the mouth because he's speaking from the voice that she would connect to the hardest. Okay. Because obviously it's not another Rory Kinnear, it's her husband. This looks like her husband, but it's also coming out of the mouth. And also, we don't have all the answers of what their relationship was like. I kind of have a feeling that violent abusers are also very vocal abusers as well, and emotional abusers.
I kind of feel like
it's like coming out. Yeah, like maybe coming out of the mouth is a representation of verbal abuse as well as physical abuse. but also it could be representing truth. It could be representing something else. But I wondered that too, of why is that birth different than all the other ones?
Yes. And like, I was also wondering if it was sort of like a gagging, like a shut up, like a type of thing. I don't know.
Could be.
I don't know.
Yeah,
that was one part that I really was left like being like,
Yeah, because I mean, I think I feel like because he was so vocal and it's like almost like that was the voice she kept hearing constantly. Was him like Papa, like he was always yelling at her.
Yeah.
Sort of like maybe
really hard to watch. Those abusive scenes.
Yeah,
I will fully admit that I cried when they are arguing face to face about how she wants a divorce and he's telling her they can't, and she's screaming like it's I have a life too, or whatever she says. Like I have my own like I just started bawling both in the theater and when I watched it a second time because it was just so like emotional and just like the emotion was just carried out so well by these actors. Like it was so believable and so reflective of real life situations,
and it didn't seem kind of exploitative in any way, whereas I often some films touch on different things and it comes across very exploitative, and I felt like it just felt real.
Yes,
and he was having this conversation about I'm going to kill myself then, but it wasn't done in such a dramatic, ridiculous way that people would be like, oh, it actually felt like, yes, this is something that does happen and it's an everyday thing and people deal with this.
Yeah, it felt really realistic, especially how he hits her and she goes back and then she just loses her shit at that point and she engages in what, psychologists call reactive abuse, and she starts pushing him and get out and screaming him, and then then it kind of switches where she's now been pushed to her limit and she becomes the abuser as well, even though it's reactive abuse and it's a little bit different than the one initially perpetrating the abuse, it still is, it just felt so authentic, of what those situations were like, and
that tense feeling. And I know even like in the scenes where they are talking, you'd notice that the light is very almost like vignette and it's very warm and dark. Like, and you feel like kind of insular and like a little bit claustrophobic. Like it's just
like the darkness is closing in on you and this heavy weighted oppression is just like coming in on you. It was like that at the beginning when she goes out to the countryside and she's walking, and even all of that started to become vignetted, and it was like and I could tell, I was like, oh, the darkness it's starting to come from her. It's gonna start getting creepy.
Yeah, because that was one of the things I noticed with all the scenes with her and the husband. They were all dark, and the vignette was all very like crowding in and coming down and down, and so it's kind of dragging you in. And you immediately kind of almost felt like you were, it was like walking into a bummer. You know what I mean? It just gave you that thing, and anxious.
Yeah, and it gave me anxiety, and it was hard to breathe in those scenes. I was like, oh yeah.
And again, that's a testament to really good cinematography and like thinking about how not only just the story but other things you can employ that are going to carry that through and make it seem like it's really real.
And since I'm pursuing a career in psychology as a therapist and stuff, I've worked with counseling suicidal individuals, and it just, I don't know, because I think also because of my experiences working with them and hearing them say such similar, the clients say such similar things, it just was like, oh, a knife in my heart. I was just like, oh, wow, this is intense. Yeah. Very intense of it.
And I think that's why it was sort of put in that kind of, I don't know, the way it was done was just so classy, if that's the right word. Because I feel like often when people talk about relationships or things where someone says that as a response or whatnot, it's often kind of put in this frame of the person's crazy and it's this big thing, but the reality is not so sinister, I think.
No, it's actually a very human thing to have thoughts like that. And that's, I think that's why this movie while I loved it and there's so many layers and I'm just kind of obsessed with it. It also, it also freaked me out because for me, the movies that scare me the most are actually the ones where it's like reality and it's reflective of reality.
Yeah.
The ones that get me, like I can see all the vampires, all the werewolves, all the like spooky ghouls or whatever, and that never scares me. I mostly giggle at those ones. But but you give me a movie like this or with things that could really happen, like Contagion or something like that, and I get like, oh my. Ooh.
Well, you reminded me is that Alex was a writer on 28 Days Later.
Oh, yeah, I love that movie. Oh.
Yeah, that seems like one of the most, I would say, probably one of the most realistic ways a zombie outbreak could happen and how people act and how I think this is something that's tropey now, but when that movie came out, it wasn't so much a trope that it's the survivors that are the monsters, not the zombies.
Yeah, at the time it came out, there wasn't, a plethora of TV shows.
The women who survived were then looked at by the surviving army as, oh, well, I can screw them. They're there for us. They're not there as survivors. They're there as like hookers for us, even though they're like regular women and teenage girls and girls that are virgins that should not be raped because soldiers are bored. And it was, it's interesting you said that about movies that are horror films, but they have these realness moments that are more frightening than the actual thing that you're supposed to be afraid of.
Yeah.
I think for me, that was Hereditary because
that one got me because I was like,
Hereditary for me was hard with the son and mother relationship because I had a very similar relationship with my mom. Not like what happens in Hereditary, but my mom's bipolar, and she was. I come from a family that does not believe in mental disorders or mental problems or mental anything, and so she would have, she would go in and out of mental institutions. She would have, a plethora of things. I mean, I shouldn't say institutions. We call them rehab, right? Or places where self-help centers or whatever. And then also in that era, it was lithium or electric shock. There wasn't Prozac yet. There wasn't a lot of, and I'm not saying Prozac is what you use for bipolar because bipolar is very different than depression and anxiety. And it's also a spectrum. And, we know so much more now, but in the 70s, we didn't. And my mom just had massive mood swings, and there would be moments where she acted grateful that I was alive, and then other moments where she wished she had like aborted me. And that movie was hard. It's also another movie that's not a horror film that reminded me a lot of Hereditary was Ordinary People with Mary Tyler Moore, and it's like from the 80s, and it's basically a son, his brother dies in a boating accident. And his parents basically just ignore him because their favorite son died. And the only one that was the not favorite son. And it's like that. It's like that feeling of not being wanted by a parent when it should be inherent. And I think it happens a lot in horror films that do it well, of parents that don't act like good parents. I mean, abuse is like pretty standard in horror films, but that kind of abuse of not being wanted. And that reminded me a lot in this movie of not feeling wanted, not feeling accepted for who you are, not feeling loved for who you are, but people keep trying to change you or people want you to be something else. And, this is a movie about grief. This is a movie about abuse, but it's also about a woman who is married that never got to be herself fully and was punished when she tried. And I think that's so horrific to think about, because when you get married, you hope that you're marrying your best friend. You hope you're marrying someone who accepts you for who you are, not someone who thinks they can change you into what they want. And that happens in so many marriages on different spectrums of levels, right? Like some of it's really violent, some of it's just verbal and emotional, some of it's just really subtle, but still very painful. And I think when you're in a relationship, and not even married, just in a long-term relationship, if you're not growing together and if you don't respect each other equally, it's doomed from the start. And sadly, a lot of relationships like this one that you see, it's like clearly it was not healthy, but also clearly it was just sad for both parties. It was not. And to me, that's horrific. Like, to me, that's interesting when you see that in a horror film setting. But also,
anything that can be real or is something that can, you've seen or can see or you've sort of experienced, anything like that. That's what sticks with me in these kind of movies, is it's like I'll walk away and go, oh my God, what if that happened to me? You
Yeah.
know, or like, you know, I think, you know, you kind of forget and the different experiences, and the movies that go that extra mile to give you that like sense of it's real fear, because you're not worried about an imaginary thing.
No, because they're tapping into the like emotional, into the psyche, into all of that, and that's some heavy shit sometimes, you know. It really is.
Yeah.
I have a really bad potty mouth tonight. I'm sorry.
No,
I mean, you look at
mom here as well.
It's like when you look at certain horror films that are considered art or are considered like the cream of the crop, like Rosemary's Baby, that shows paranoia and relationship paranoia to a beautiful level. Like that's a level of paranoia, of also baby paranoia, which to me speaks to me because like I'm horrified of pregnancy. So that movie really spoke to me, but also it speaks to like relationships and how people change once they have children, and you know, that expectation of motherhood and how you're supposed to be, but also fatherhood. Like that movie's deeper than most people give it credit for. And when you see movies like that, you start to like really realize that the best horror films out there aren't the ones that have the greatest monsters or the greatest jump scares or the greatest like weird ass creatures or slashers or whatever. Yep. It's about what resonates with you so deep that you can't not think of that movie. Like it stays with you forever, because there's something that really hit you hard, whether it's your own background, or whatever.
I remember the first, I think we've talked about this before, maybe Bonnie, but the very first time I saw The Purge.
Oh yeah.
The one with Ethan Hawke, the first original film. Yeah. I was thinking about it for like the whole weekend afterwards, going, that could really happen. And oh my God, I'm fucked. You know what I mean?
I thought it would happen when Trump was president.
If you're going to
seen it,
no, if you haven't,
I won't ruin it for you, but I will tell you when you watch it.
But it's something that essentially can really, could really happen.
It could. Yeah. It's kind of like Lord of the Flies, right? Like if you leave kids on their own, it's like when you leave kids on their own without adults on an island. Yeah, they're gonna kill each other. Yeah, it's gonna get brutal. It's basically human nature to, I hate to say this, but it's human nature to, when the chips are down, you will attack each other. I think War of the Worlds is a great example of that. I think most horror films where it's a post-apocalyptic is a great example of that. The Road is a great example of that.
I feel like you guys should make me, or I feel like you ladies should make me a list.
Yeah, we need to make you a playlist.
I will. I'll make you a list.
Yeah, give me homework.
Yes, because there are like that one was one where it was, you think it's going to be really horrible, like, and there's monsters and whatnot, and then you watch it and you realize that it's what's scary about it is that we're the monsters essentially.
It's the people. I mean, we got that from Mary Shelley, right? We got that from Frankenstein. It wasn't Frankenstein's creation that was the monster. It was Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein, and the villagers. Those are the monsters. It's never the monster that are the monster.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, animals so much. This was like, I think that one though was like, it's a culmination of so many fears of what happens when there is no rule, etc., and you put in that situation.
I will tell you the premise of the movie, which is not a spoiler. You need to know this just to know what it is. It's basically
I?
Well, maybe not. I don't know.
What's going in blind? What's going in blind?
I'm not going to say anything more because I don't want to be a spoiler in this group.
Let her go in blind, as blind as a bat.
I seriously, I love watching things completely blind. I have no idea what it is.
But I will tell you though, after you watch any of the Purge movies, because there's many.
Oh yeah, just watch the first one.
You will think, I think they're all good actually.
Well, I think they're all good too, but if you start with number one, and it'll give you the...
Yeah, you start with the first one in any series of a horror. But I will say, when Trump was president, there was a moment there where I was like, oh shit. It's kind of like Hunger Games. You've seen Hunger Games, right?
Oh, I love Hunger Games.
Yeah. So like when Trump was president, I was like, okay, we're about 2 months out before we start doing Hunger Games.
Yeah.
That is one of the only like teeny, like young adult teeny bopper type series things that I'm like, oh, I love
the word teeny bopper.
That's
like my favorite thing.
Everyone thinks it's like a teen movie, and I'm like, that movie's brutal.
No, it's good. It's good. I read the books too, you know, and I really like them. And I think it's also just because I love the fact that she's like bow and arrow, which I used to
archery.
Yeah, I did archery for like 3 years as a kid, and like I'm so into like horseback riding and archery, and it was just kind of like, I don't know, she was just kind of like, oh, she's such a strong female hero type thing, and it was just also so it was a very adult movie. It wasn't very serious. I can't wait to see the next one. I'm very, very excited to see the next one.
I mean, here's the thing about this movie. It hit me hard because I've had a stalker, I've had bad relationships. Yes. I've had freeze moments, and I've also had fight or flight moments. And this movie, luckily, this movie wasn't a trigger movie for me, because I mean, some of those movies, like I can't watch movies that have violent depictions of rape. I can't watch movies that have.
Oh, I walked out of Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. I went and saw that in theater, and I walked out at the.
God.
I was like, I can't.
I was waiting for that. The rest of the film is great. All the
I walked out.
I was like,
yeah, and we all have different triggers, and I'm not saying you shouldn't, but I said with this movie, it wasn't triggering, but it made me think of all the times I was like Harper, and it made me realize this is a commonality that I think happens with a lot of women, and they probably don't even realize it until maybe they watch this movie and something will hit them like, oh shit, that's happened to me, or oh wait, I know what that feels like. Or that's why I think it's such a different experience for a woman to go see this film as opposed to a guy, straight man. It's just because there's a different level when you are raised to always know that you have to watch your back. And guys don't have to do that.
Yeah, and I think that no matter who you are,
heterosexual cis,
heterosexual, not
heterosexual cis.
Yeah. Thank you for the clarification. Yes, that's what I mean. That's what I think. And again, not all straight guys are the same. I'm not doing a straight man hating thing right now. But I will say, I think women will really see this movie differently than straight male hetero viewers, because it's just a different way that we have to live. And I think, but it's also, I mean, not just women, but trans, I think gay, anything where you are not necessarily instantly safe. You know what I mean? Like you have to be kind of more vigilant about that stuff.
Yeah, and for me, I think this film left me with that, like that sense that of fear that can turn to horror very quickly. And I think that no matter what your background is, what your age is, where you're from, that sentiment is something everyone can relate to.
Yeah, it's like the omnipresent, like ever lurking realistic danger that's there that we have to think about all the time. And I love this movie. I give it last one we did. I had I can't say anything bad. I can't say anything bad.
It's really difficult. Like, for me, this film hits and ticks all the boxes. So I can't really give it a bad, like I'd probably say if for me it's a 5 out of 5. Like I think it's amazing. And I mean I could drop it to a 4, but like, to be honest, just everything about it I think is so good. From the cinematography to the sound to the music, just to the storytelling, to the acting. Like when you think about it, really it's only 2 actors. So, it's all of it's among both of them. So, and if they weren't good actors, it wouldn't work either. So, I think so much of it is just so well executed and done in such a tasteful and like realistic way that it never feels exploitative. It never feels like it's being overly dramatic. So for me, it's definitely.
And how creepy was I'm sorry, I just thought about this. The split hands around the head. Oh.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Even when the boy goes, look what you did, and his hands like split and he's just going like this. It's like a hot dog split in 2. I was just like, stop doing it like this.
Well, I loved this, and I am so honored again to be part of this group of.
Yeah, me too.
This
I like this. I like our little pyramid here that we have, a little trio.
Thanks also for dealing with my attention deficit.
Oh, same. I never interrupt to be rude. I have a thought, and if I don't say it, I'm gonna forget it because my brain just keeps moving so fast.
I feel like all three of us, if we were in the same spot, this is exactly how we would be speaking to each other.
And also, I have to explain to some of my friends who don't understand attention deficit. It's kind of like that when you're a kid and you're just so excited to talk about something. So you're not interrupting because you're being rude or you don't want to hear that person's thought. It's also just pent up excitement to talk to cool people about cool stuff. So you just it's like you just get like Christmas Day, you just get so excited to open all your presents. It's like that. It's not, it's not meant to be rude. It's not. I have this problem all the time, and it's just like it's so nice to.
This is why I'm so particular with the like love Bonnie. I know what Bonnie's like, and I already had a great vibe about Jenna, so I was like, I know she's going to be great. And
I love that we're both nerds. I love that we both take notes.
You should see from my side, I have like a billion tabs open. I have notes of all the things that I've thought, because I just go, so I have to put them down as well, because I'm like, oh no, I'll forget.
Well, thank you.
But thank you. I'm interested to see what the next installment of Alex Garland's career is next.
Me too.
And where you can go from here.
And I'm very honored to be part of this group. So thank you for including me, but also thank you also for getting me to watch movies I wouldn't necessarily have at the top of my list. I didn't have Men at the top of my list to watch. I have so many other horror movies that have just come out that I'm like, I gotta see that. And
I credit Jenna with this one, because it was already on my list, but then when Jenna was pumping it up, that gave me the kick up the boot that I needed to go out and watch it.
For mentioning
this. I did.
Yeah, but also thank you for recommending X. That wasn't at the top of my list either.
Yeah, that was a great one too. Yeah.
I watched that because
I'll take some credit for that one.
Because the lady suggested it. So I am like, I'm a horror fan, but I don't watch everything the second it comes out. So it's nice to be recommended things that are thought provoking. So
yeah. Well, Fresh is on my list next, because I'll watch it tonight. We both talked about it.
And I also want to say that I love everything both of you say. Like it's so great to connect with like-minded individuals, and you are both beautiful, smart, awesome people. So it's so cool to hear your thoughts and to be able to converse like this. It's great. Last time I left, I was smiling. Same thing.
No, it makes me have faith in female kind, but also it's like
I leave with the nice woman fuzzies.
Yeah, but also it's nice to talk horror with women, because this is still a genre too that I think a lot of women aren't necessarily as forthcoming publicly to talk about a lot of times. And I've met so many film critics and so many screenwriters and directors who are women that are like, we have grown up with horror films. We love horror films. We love thrillers and horrors, and anything of the gamut runs the gamut to classics to things like A24 horror films. And it's just nice to talk shop with other horror fans that are also women. Because when you talk to guy horror fans, they have a lot of, and I mean straight guys, they have a very much different perspective, which is expected, but also women have a different perspective too. And I think that's why diversity in writers' rooms and having more women be screenwriters and directors is so important to the genre. But also horror is a genre that is also very open to having new screenwriters and new directors who are women come on board and speak their truth and speak from their experience, but also show their nightmares. And I think it's just so much fun to actually be able to talk with other female fans of this and people that are watching this. I'm glad we have all different viewers that are going to probably talk about us in the comments very carefully. I apologize if I offended anyone, but I am very happy that I have a venue to talk about horror with like-minded and also women that you two also get me to think about things I didn't normally think about. So I learned something, which is more important to me than people agreeing with me all the time. I'd rather learn from other women.
Yeah,
and
I love that, like Jenna was saying as well, like, you know, the evolution of banter. And I love being able to hear individual stories, and like, I don't want to sit on a podcast where everyone's yelling at each other because we disagree.
No.
I don't want to sit on one where we're all like, yes.
Yeah.
I like to hear a variation, you know, and I think that both of you have so much to offer from different backgrounds and different, you know, but we're all on the same page. Kind of, you know. So I think it's really it's really good, and it's really valuable. And just, you know, I left the last one of these just so chuffed.
Me too. I was like, I hope they invite me back because I was so excited.
Same.
No, well, now we've started this, I kind of feel like I don't know if I want to invite anybody else now, because I feel like you guys are the stars here, and so
yeah, we've started our own. This is our own coven.
Well, I'm always game, so you just let me know.
Yeah, and I always am happy to start a new coven. So, like, if you want me as a horror film,
I love that you just said that. I love coven.
Me too.
Yeah. Well, I was going to put Hellbender on my list because
it's so good. It's so good.
It's really, really good.
Oh, you love that one as well?
Okay,
awesome.
Yes,
it's that's the one that I wanted to put on my list, and I did speak.
Yes, the music in it, everything. It's so good.
So good. Yeah. So I had the opportunity just really briefly to speak to the female, like the director of that film. So yeah, I was gonna try and see if we can get her on as well.
Please.
I think that would be awesome.
Oh my god, yeah. That would be huge.
That would be
so that would be awesome if that happens. So I'll keep everyone posted. Okay. Because then we can really live our coven dreams. But yeah, so again, I just want to thank Bonnie for coming on. She's just always a legend, and always always game, which I love. It's my favorite attitude, of course. And if you're, you know, a Twitter head, you can follow her on Twitter.
Bonnie Girl. It's the same thing I use for everything.
Same one as for Instagram, isn't it? Yeah.
And everything.
Yeah, and if you get lost, you can always find your way to my page, and from there bounce off. And we've got Jenna Hayes, so it's on Instagram and Twitter as well. And again, thank you so much, both of you, for taking time out of your own lives to come and do this, and just for the joy. So, I mean, that makes me happy as well, because, you know, I do this purely for the fun of it. So it's always great to find women who are also doing things because they're passionate and enjoy them. So it's always amazing. Any last thoughts before we go into the night?
I mean, just keep an eye out on my social media stuff. I've got some cool projects coming up that I'm going to be releasing, some creative things. And like she said, it's twitter.com/Jenna Hayes, Instagram.com/Jenna Hayes, Facebook.com/The Real Jenna Hayes, because someone took my name from there. And they all of those pages have links to my link tree, which has all of my things that you can go there and get, my merchandise store, my OnlyFans, all of it. So
and I'm Bonnie Girl on everything. So it's just Bonnie, GRRL. And also you can look up my name on Amazon and see all the books and comics I've written. I mentioned Girls Against Girls. It's a good, here's the thing. I wrote it in 2009. I really need to write an updated one because my cyberbullying section is like, just calling it cyberbullying has already aged it. And sadly, bullying has transcended into even more horrible things. So I need to probably rewrite that book or do a sequel. But my book is on there. And also, if you like immersive murder mystery games, I write for Hunt a Killer, and we do a lot of different murder mysteries. And Agatha Christie, Murder at Hunter's Lodge is my most recent one. But I'm working on a couple other ones that should be really creepy. Interesting, so stay tuned.
That's so cool. I'm so gonna buy some of them for my sister because she loves that stuff. So
I would say start with the ones on Amazon because they're cheaper. So like we have all-in-one box, and then we have subscription boxes. So it's a 6-episode murder mystery well. But the ones on Amazon are good gateway drugs, so to speak, to our other games. Murder at the Motel is really fun. But here's the thing. I know I'm like totally advertising my job, but
no, it's awesome. I think it's amazing that you do this. It's so inspiring. It's so freaking cool.
I will tell you, like, I have had a lot of different jobs as a writer and a lot of different jobs as a comedian and actor and creator. This one speaks to me on a level that's almost scary, because now I know how to commit really elaborate murders and get away with it. So now I can never kill anyone in real life.
But you can give advice if we ever need something.
Yeah. If any of you kill someone, just call me. I'll let you know how to get rid of the body. But we did not have this conversation.
No. I may like the spooky stuff, but I'm such a lover.
Here's the thing. I would never kill anyone unless they really did something horrible. I mean, it would have to be like a John Wick level situation. It would never be like that. You took the last Twinkie. It would never be that. It would never be like, you know what I mean?
Don't mess
like,
with your dog. Don't mess with my dog.
Don't mess with my pet. Yeah, don't mess with that. No, I would say, as being a horror fan and now writing horror as a career, it does make me look at things with a different eye, in a different sense. And I think a lot of us who have worked in the horror industry, whether it's creating something or whether it's acting in something, or even women's studies or feminism, we are always going to look at horror a different way than just a normal fan would. So this type of interaction and discussion is always going to be fun for me, but I always learn something from you guys, and I always learn something from the commenters and from our viewers. So thanks for just having me, and also hopefully I haven't freaked everyone out by talking about murder.
No. I think that's a great note to end this on, as we're going to all go.
Yes.
Well, it's daytime for you, Renee, but we're all going to bed over here.
Yeah.
So, on that note, again, thank you so much. My dog needs treats.
Yes. He's just staring there going, how long are you gonna Beautiful. Okay, thank you guys so much again, and it's been absolutely awesome.
Thank you. Till next time.
Bye.